could indeed very well be live. It's a distinct possibility. And we'll see if I actually get to participate in the live chat this time or not. We'll find out, won't we? If I get another little weird Tyrannosaurus Rex icon telling me I get nothing.
Oh, yeah. That problem from last time.
Yeah. And then yesterday or 2 days ago, whenever we did our last live stream together, in the middle of the stream, you fixed something on your side, and then on my side, it went away. It literally went away. It's like, oh no, you can't. You can't. You can't play here.
No, not today. We're not having you today. Well, I'm on Twitch anyway.
Well, that's right. We'll find out. By God, yes, we will.
Right, I'm just flying over to my checks.
Yeah, let's see. Well, we've got one viewer. Well, for those who are watching, welcome to. Oh, damn! I should have proofread. I should have proofread the slides. That's on me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Medieval Buzz. I am Rachel from the Creative Contessa, and this is Philip from Irish Medieval History. And we are super excited to have a nice, fun, casual chat with you this morning about all the interesting things that are happening in the medieval history world. And yes, I know you are all thinking, is it medieval history in the past and therefore set in stone? No, it is not.
No, it's not. No. It was.
Yeah, isn't that right? Isn't that so? Is that something you encounter a lot in your own history work? Right? Is that we have to constantly reconsider what we know.
Well, the biggest problem from my perspective studying Irish medieval history is that I had a grandmother that was saying one thing, and then I had historians at the time saying another thing. And lo and behold, after actually doing a wee bit of recent revisionist history in Ireland, guess who was right and guess who was wrong? It ends up my grandmother was a bit more right than a lot of people said she was. And this whole nationalist thing of, this very kind of nationalist view was a whole heap of garbage, and we were more kind of clan-like and family-like than people thought originally, So you're completely right. We are kind of going through this stage right now in our study of medieval history of kind of rewriting this kind of mad kind of nationalist perspective, and then instead looking at it as a sort of kind of clan, kind of more family perspective more than anything else, which is more of a healthy perspective, I think, more than anything else.
Well, there's a difference between the exegesis of history and the eisegesis of history. And one is where you look at history and come to conclusions. The other is where you come to conclusions and then look for the history to back up your perspective. Right?
Well, I can't say I'm not guilty of that one.
I mean, it's human nature. No, most people, there are some bad actors out there who do literally wake up and say, I'm going to remold history for my benefit. But most people, I think, at least come at it from a good faith perspective. It's just that I think it can be very hard to separate yourself from your deep-seated beliefs, from the biases that your beliefs, imbue you with. Do you agree?
Oh, definitely 100%. And Susan, sorry for cutting in there, Rachel, but Susan, thanks very much for that comment. It actually means a ton to us to know that's working. So thanks very much for that, Susan. And anyone jumping into the chat right now, definitely give us your feedback to what's going on, especially with this revisionist history that's going on, because as we'll be going through the slides, especially my slides this week, there's a lot of revisionist history going on, especially from the archaeologist perspective, where we're digging up all these fresh bodies and they're not giving up the goods that we originally thought they would. Yeah. And you're perfectly right. Like our conversation tomorrow, which is trying to identify with Dr. Ian O'Neill, what is a clan? Because for the time being, we kind of have, especially from, I don't want to be pointing or naming names here, but there's a lot of Irish Americans that have this perspective of the Jacobite Williamite Wars, because a lot of Irish Americans immigrated from Ireland during that period where they kind of have more of a 16th century identity of what is a clan rather than a much more earlier medieval perspective of what is a clan, because even our interpretation of the word clan does change over time. And so it will be very, very interesting tomorrow, probably a lot of, including my heart breaking tomorrow, because you're perfectly right. I do have that very biased view, and you've highlighted a few times of my view of what is a clan, because I love the I'm very biased towards the idea of, tartans and clans. Like, I'm Clan O'Brien and he's Clan O'Neill. And
Right.
tower houses and having that traditional assemblies and stuff. I love it, but is it reality? Do you know?
It is, and Hollywood has not helped. Hollywood and Co. Hollywood is just sort of a stand-in for movies worldwide, right? So the movie industry, God knows, television shows, oh my God, the streaming shows over the last 20 years have done so much damage across multiple cultures, not just the West. Korean dramas have depicted people wearing all the wrong kinds of clothes, living in the wrong kinds of spaces, interacting in the wrong kinds of ways. So we're fighting a lot of misinformation at so many levels.
My wife's biggest problem, because my wife is from Japan, and her biggest problem right now is the fact they get a lot of clothing from the Edo period, which is kind of Japan's version of the Victorian era. They get a lot of clothing from that era and then suddenly dump it into the medieval era because it looks nice. It looks really, really nice. And yeah, of course, it looks really amazing, looks really nice. And sometimes they even get clothing from modern Japanese clothing and then shove it into the medieval period as well. And yeah, I 100%. That's such a good example there, Christina. I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, but that's a really good example. That's the interpretation we have right now, is exactly that. Outlander is, and I'm not going to turn around and say, oh, I'm the saint on the high horse or anything. That's the interpretation of a clan I have as well, of us in the tower house. We all have our tartan on and we're all having a nice little feast together. That's my perspective.
Yeah.
But is it the actual perspective of medieval people in the medieval period? Is that how their clan was? And so it would be really awesome to get Dr. Ian O'Neill, because he came to me first. We were talking away with Mihal last month, and he was saying, your perspective and everyone's perspective is wrong. I need to go on your channel and I need to set the record straight on what is a clan in the medieval period, because the Outlander interpretation and the medieval view of what is a clan is completely different,
Right.
So it would be very exciting to get him on tomorrow, and not tomorrow, but the day after, and see what the story is. What is a clan in the medieval era,
Yeah, and it's funny because then you have the other side of the coin is people think, oh, clans, that's only Irish and or Scottish. No, no. So I'll be interested to talk with the good doctor, because I'm coming at it from my knowledge of Florentine history and social history. And, the more I started thinking about it, the Florentine families in the Middle Ages and early Renaissance are massively clan-like. I mean, so I think he and I are going to find a lot of really interesting ways to compare and contrast, and to continue to build those connections, of how people across medieval Europe, yes, they were different and they certainly had different specific details, but in certain ways there were some shared, very important commonalities. So yeah,
definitely.
Very, very, very excited.
Oh, definitely. Because you've been looking at, you actually have a video on your channel. Is that my channel or your channel? I can't remember now at this stage. It's on my channel, isn't it?
The clothing one?
15, the one you did for my channel. Yeah. It's on 15th century native Gaelic clothing. Yeah. So, of course, you're going to be very, very excited. And also to show them kind of the stuff you've been working on as well, because Dr. Ian O'Neill doesn't specialize in clothing.
Right.
He knows enough to have a rant about that tartan. Clan tartan wasn't the thing. You do have like tartan stuff of the era, which is from the perspective of the people at the time trying to survive, but they don't have a labeled clan tartan. But as we were saying before, maybe you'll correct me on this one as well, villages and areas do have kind of their own fisherman belt to identify where they are, when they're lost at sea or killed in battle and stuff. So there is like a local belt that you could say is probably clannish, could you?
I mean, there's always ways of identifying. There's always visual ways of identifying oneself, one's affiliation, right? In mainland Europe, starting in about the 12th century, late 11th century, 12th century, it's heraldry, right? Heraldry is the way that people identify either family or affiliation or origin, etc. colors all throughout, across Asia. There's different polities, different cultures that use different colors to identify who they are, where they're from, their status, their position. In the Korean court, in Joseon, starting actually in the Shilla dynasty, and then in Tang, Song, Yuan, all the dynasties in China, the color of your work uniform would talk about what you did in the court, what kind of bureaucrat you were, right? So the idea of identifying yourself visually is not new. And it's, to say that people in Scotland and or Ireland in the Middle Ages had no way of visually identifying themselves as affiliated, that's silly, of course.
Yeah.
But it's just not tartan. It's not what we now call tartans, which at the time was not called tartan. It was basically called multicolor cloth. The translation of the Scots and or English and or Irish words for that from the 15th century. So the idea that a certain region, in any place, might have a more common and frequent homespun pattern. So there's a difference between, the professional weavers making their very, very fine and expensive, well-finished fabrics, and then the home economy, where you have your own loom at home and you're just weaving your own fabric for your own family. You're going to use whatever plants happen to be in your area, and there's probably going to be weeds, and they're probably going to be kind of common in your geographic area. So that means that it's more likely that maybe in this particular region, people are weaving a homespun wool that is red in one direction and blue in the other, because they've got lots of matter and they've got lots of woad. But that doesn't mean that it actually identifies them as being a clan. Yeah. So it's more likely, but it's not definitive.
Definitely. And I think Christina is completely right. Like, you do have a kind of that Nordic, because you can see that in the early medieval period, how a lot of Viking families come in and they play by, obviously you have Turkis, who's the first fellow who comes in, and he's not playing by the rules whatsoever. He causes as much anarchy and as much chaos as possible into Ireland. And eventually Mael Shocknall the First has enough of it. So what he does is he gets one of the younger warriors called the Fenian to dress up as women, right? And he gets them to go off in one of the isles, and he gets them to hide up as women. And just as Turgis and his little war band is coming over to them, they suddenly ambush Turgis and they capture him, and then they kind of beat him up and they torture him for a bit. And then eventually Mael Shocknall the First gets a hold of him, and he chains up Turgis and he chucks him into the river to drown. Which the reason why he gets him to drown is because of a whole cleansing thing. The early medieval Ireland, instead of burning bodies and stuff, they would have thrown him into the water, because it was, kind of seen as a kind of baptizing of the
bodies
soul
for the
in
win.
their interpretation. I hope so.
Right?
That'd be nice. That's an interesting one as well.
That's actually probably one of
the
reasons we have so many bog bodies. Is that, right? It's that method of disposal.
Just cleansing them.
Right,
into the water you go.
Yeah.
But my main point there is that the majority of people that came into Ireland at the time, such as the next lot of Vikings that came in, as we would call them yesterday, the Donegal, the new Vikings, was the likes of Ivor the Boneless, Olaf the White, and Aid the Deep-Minded. And they knew how to play by the rules. They knew when they came into Ireland, they had to identify who they are, who their father was, who their father's father was, and where their father's father was from. And they knew how to play that, because that's the kind of clan clique that they kind of had between, as you were saying there, Christina, the Nordic people, the Norse. They knew how to get on with the Gaelic clans in Ireland at the time, as we would refer to as the Tuat. Directly translated would be tribe, although by the time we get to this period from the Bronze Age, it's gone a little bit more advanced by that period. And I think the word king group, because it was like the clans in that point were a bit more advanced. They were king groups, because not only did you have your own family under the one ringfort area, you would have also had marriage alliances. So you had people brought in for marriages. You also had people brought in as kind of really well looked after hostages. So when you went into another ring fort and you wanted them to be loyal, you'd say, okay, give me over some of your family members so I know you won't rebel against me, and I'll look after them really well. I won't mistreat them. So they weren't like put in a dungeon or anything. They could like go around the whole ring fort all they wanted, and they would also be given like fancy clothes, really nice food, because the head of the king group, the Reed, the king, he wanted to show, hey, look, I'm like a really, really great king and everything. So he would dress them up and feed them super well. And last but not least, you also had children that they would adopt into their family as well. So not only did you have people that they would subjugate, that they would take as hostages, but you also would have allies as well, that they would adopt their children and give them a full education. So you had a full society inside the ring forts.
Yeah, so it's that whole concept of taking hostages but treating them well, like that's you see that across lots of polities all across the globe, right? I mean, from the Americas, Asia, Europe, it seems like a really clever way of kind of ensuring the peace. It's like, well, you're going to give me your precious daughter, I'm going to give you my precious daughter, and if either of us acts up, we know the precious daughter probably isn't going to do well. But in the interim, precious daughter will be treated like a precious daughter. It's a pretty clever system of mutually assured destruction.
Yeah, I guess that's one way to put it.
Yeah. Okay, so everyone, today we are here to actually discuss the medieval buzz. So we've got some really excellent news, some good news for everyone, nothing bad. Actually, today's news is really interesting. There's been some interesting finds. There's a fantastic exhibit, once in a lifetime opportunity for those of you who are in the United Kingdom. And we've got also some very crucial reconsideration of history that we're going to talk about. And it's going to help us highlight why it's important that we not just accept that what we've been taught is in fact necessarily the truth, which is not the same as saying we live in a post-fact world. That's not what I mean. Not what I mean. Do not go there.
Just opening up the can the chat.
Okay, so what do we have to start with? I don't remember what I put for the first thing once I added my stuff in.
Well, you're jumping over there. I'll just answer this question there. So did the Norse follow Breton law? Turgis, when he first arrived around 793 to 836, he definitely does not follow Breton law. He comes in there and just wrecks up as much as possible. He's one of the main kind of figures of that kind of Viking invasion, if you want to call it that. He only comes in with 120 men, doesn't really follow the rules, and eventually is chopped up. However, when you had the likes of Alfred the Boneless, Olaf the White, and Aed the Deep-Minded, because they need that trade, because ultimately there's actually way more money to make from trading rather than raiding, especially in Dublin. Like, they look at Dublin and say, hey, wait, there's no modern there's cities in Ireland called monastic settlements, but they're not nearly as advanced as what the Alfred the Boneless, Olaf the White, and Aed the Deep-Minded want. They want urban trading settlements. So they're just like, hey, look, they turn on to Mael Shocknall the First, and they're like, hey, look, we need to start building up these poor areas into massive, vibrant cities and stuff. And so that's what starts to happen. These areas designated to them starts to build up. And as a part of that, they start to follow more Irish culture rather than their Norse culture. And you can see that because straight away, Ivor the Boneless starts adopting and starts giving hostages over to the Nael, who are kind of the high kings of Ireland at the time, the kind of ones with the biggest stick, which at the time is Mael Shocknall the First. Just answer your question there.
Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into our first piece of news. So you found this, Philip. Tell us about this.
I did. Now, this one is absolutely amazing to be quite honest with you. And we were very lucky to find this one. Now, obviously, I didn't find it myself. It was a nice little Polish team over in the north of Poland. Previously, they had just taken down a very precious Irish cream shop. It had been up since the 60s. So many people were kind of depressed to see it being taken down. However, it was taken down in a place that was previously both a Teutonic German settlement and it was also a Polish settlement. Just before the Germans had moved in, it was originally a Polish settlement as well. And so straight away, when the beloved, loved ice cream shop had been taken down, archaeologists had moved in very, very quick because this was a very, very important fortification for both the Polish and the Teutonic Knights. And so straight away, right under the ice cream shop, they had found this slab, which straight away just suddenly like really set off alarm bells, because the style of this slab is more of a Goth Swedish style slab. So straight away, archaeologists were just blown back by this slab alone. So eventually they managed to uncover the slab, get the slab out of the way, and under it then they found this perfect skeleton. Now, don't get me wrong, obviously over time things had eroded and stuff and fallen apart and stuff, but they had found the outlines of the likes of riveted mail, helmets. They have a very good idea that it was originally a heater shield, although the heater shield itself has kind of fallen apart over time, but the impression of the heater shield is somewhat still there. So it gives us a very good idea that this is most likely a knight from around the 12th century. That's kind of the fair idea that we're starting to get at this point. Now, this original discovery was around July. So in July, they had originally found all this, and through various different companies, they started to bring who they had nicknamed at this point Lancelot. They started to bring him from different companies and started doing various tests to get a fair idea on identifying who this gentleman was. At this point, we still don't really know who this man is. It won't be until next year that we can finally sit down and conclude who this gentleman is. But for the time being, the slab itself, as I was saying before, is Swedish. However, it's starting to give us an idea that perhaps this man may be before I say anything, remember, it hasn't been fully concluded yet, so it's still up in the air if this man most likely is Swedish, Polish, or German. However, for the time being, it seems to be indicating that it might be a Teutonic Knight. It seems to be indicating that way. But for the time being, I don't want to say any conclusions and say, hey, look, this is definitely a Teutonic Knight. We just don't know right now. And we're still trying to go through, because of the importance of this grave. Like this is even the slab alone came from Sweden. It has a whole load of carvings on it. His entire setup is very, 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 very fancy. It seems to definitely give us an idea that this guy is a very, very wealthy man. And on top of that as well, there were also 8 to 9 other graves next to him, which were also high status, and yet this was the highest status there. So it gives us an idea that this may have been, like, if it is a Teutonic Knight, and I'm not saying it is a Teutonic Knight, it may have been a commander, somebody who's very, very important. So we're very quickly trying to go through the records to try to identify who this gentleman is. So for the time being, very, very exciting stuff that's happening.
Well,
right now.
The thing about Gdansk, or Danzig, as it's known in German, is that part of the world has how shall I say this, vacillated in who controls it politically. So in terms of where that is, that it would make sense for it to be a Teutonic Knight, especially from that era. And which of course the Teutonic Order was not just Germans, right? So there's peoples from all over kind of Central and even East parts of Eastern Europe. So,
but that's exactly it. Like, is the fact that I'm turning around and saying here, like, oh well, it could be German, could be Swedish, could be Polish. We actually really don't know. The reason why we're starting to hear journalists, by the way, this is mostly journalists. Our poor woman here. I just want to highlight that our poor woman here, Kilgrave, Dr. Kilgrave, who's specializing on this grave, she hasn't actually announced anything yet. So even the words that the journalists are using, such as could he be German, could be Swedish, could it be Polish, I just need to highlight the fact that this is journalists are saying all this. Dr. Kilgrave herself doesn't, because it's literally her career on the line, doesn't want to confirm anything until next year. Okay, so just need to highlight that in the reports, she has highlighted again and again, hey, look, I don't want to confirm anything yet because, my head is on the chopping block here. So for the time being, it's all speculation, especially from the perspective of the journalists who are kind of chucking it out there to sell,
Yeah,
figures and stuff.
I love that they went ahead and named him Lancelot, because what better way to get people to click on an article than to put the name Lancelot in the headline? I mean, we live in an era of horror when it comes to journalism.
But it was the journalists that gave him the name. The team didn't even name him. I'm not even sure if the Polish team are allowed to name the graves in case there's, attachment and stuff there, or they end up with biased views and stuff. I think they have to, I know it sounds rotten and everything, but depending on the team, sometimes they have to either objectify them and I'm not saying objectify, I mean, as in like, be non-biased towards the grave. Sometimes, all right, they do give there's a lot of, it depends on the team and the laws you're dealing with. But in Ireland, it kind of switches between the two. Sometimes they want it to be, okay, you're not allowed to name this person, and you have to be non-biased towards this person. And then other times, it does seem to be, okay, straight away, this person has to be given full dignity, and you have to give this person a name. The problem is, when that does happen, is that you do have biased views that start to be given to the grave. So it's a very funny one. Like, so although more sympathy is given, obviously, to the grave itself, especially from the public perspective, it can get very biased very quickly, especially when they find out it's not who they thought it was, and then people get upset.
And you definitely don't want to stake your career and reputation on that. That could be, especially if it's got any kind of political
especially right now.
Yeah, I have friends who are professional archaeologists in Europe, and they actually get hired to do excavations like this, because anytime there's new construction in most parts of Europe, you have to call in an excavation team, right? Because they have to survey the site, and it makes developers crazy, and it makes people who want to just build a building and earn some money crazy, because you dig just 6 inches down and you're going to hit something generally in most parts of Europe. So it's, for us, this is good news. Unfortunately, for the people who wanted to build whatever it is they wanted to build, this is bad news. because if they found nothing, they could have just kept going. But now they found not just something, but some things, because it's multiple graves, as you said. And so now they will have to thoroughly examine the entire site, investigate, survey the site. And so for those of us in America, we're spoiled, right? We don't, even though depending on where you live, it's likely you will dig down and hit pre-Columbian archaeological remnants. We don't have those kinds of laws.
Yeah. Sadly, not for the time being anyway. Hopefully they'll find something more than, because in the north part of America, they seem to be finding a lot of little settlements here and there that seems to give an indication, especially up in the north of Canada and stuff. They're just finding, little areas and stuff as well, settlements and stuff. So it seems to be slightly promising up around there.
Those are just like, those weren't the result of development, though. Those were the result of archaeologists just doing a survey straight up. Like, it's, depends on where you are. There are some places, it's America's not a nation. It's just a bunch of little countries that just happen to be next to each other. Because it's not very much in the way of consistent laws across the board. So depending on the state you're in, sometimes depending on the county you're in, sometimes depending on the city you're in, could determine whether you have to do some kind of archaeological survey before you actually just tear up the ground and build something. So who knows how much archaeology has just been literally shoveled away over the decades.
Yeah. It's actually disgusting, to be honest with you. I literally always grind my teeth when I think about that sort of stuff. And just heading back over to the comment section, thank you so much for all the support, guys. It really does mean a lot to myself and Rachel.
Thank you, Brian and Siobhan. Really appreciate that. Yeah.
And Susan, I can't confirm, to be honest with you, I cannot confirm for the time until the actual report itself comes out. I can't really confirm completely what was found in the set, or at least what impressions was found in there, because I found a lot of the newspapers and stuff seemed to chuck it in there, but it's like they were listening to what Dr. Kilgrave was saying. But while she was saying this stuff to them, or at least writing an email to them, they seem to have just picked it up and then kind of reinterpreted it the way that they wanted it. So sometimes they're like, and I was reading the articles this morning. I read it last night and I was rereading it back over this morning. And there was so much of the information. I was like, one paper is saying this, the other paper is saying that. Like one paper, the Scottish paper, was saying, oh, well, there was a sword found on the grave. And then I looked at another one. It was like, oh, the impressions of a sword. I was like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. Because I can't really see the skeleton fully on that photo. But I'm pretty sure it was just a skeleton with a whole load of impressions and stuff with it, like, was at the grave. So I'll wait for next year until Dr. Kilgrave's official statement is out. Like,
right anyway. Now we're at the headline phase. We don't have the survey, the proper survey yet. So, but it's we'll have to monitor. We'll have to monitor and see what happens. See what happens with it. Yeah. So we've got some comments on pioneer graves and Native American burial grounds, if they're known. Right? If they're already known. Well, we're not talking about that, guys. We're talking about someone's going to build a new development. Depending on where you are, there may or may not be laws requiring an exploratory archaeological survey first. It depends on where you are in the U.S. I know in my home state of Delaware, housing developments go up all the time, and there is no excavation that happens before that. So, yeah. So
Jeez, that people would lose their mind in Ireland if that happened. The first thing everyone does is the archaeologists go in straight away. And even on top of that, people still get worked up and angry when the archaeologists are rushed, which happens all the time, by the way. Archaeologists go in. The recent one was in Stout Main Street, where they were so quick to try to rush the archaeologists in and out. And they found a massive one of the most important Viking areas in Ireland, which is the South Main Street archaeological dig in Cork, which is very
lots of fantastic finds from that excavation. So crucial, so crucial. Textile finds from that are just fantastic. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and yet they were rushed the whole time. The whole time, rush, and then when they were finally rushed them off the site, the builders were so slow doing everything. I think they're still constructing it today, and this has been going on for a good 5-6 years now. Like, so they were so quick to try to rush them on site and rush them back off site. And I don't even know if it's constructed yet. All I know is that it was a very slow site to build, because it was meant to be a shopping center or something, but it's gone up in the air as usual.
Susan, the article, this news item was mentioned on medievalist.net, but I don't recall that there were more details there than what we've already discussed. You always, as always, if you all are not familiar with medievalist.net, they are Daniel Sobalski runs the page and the blog and the podcast. Highly recommend it. No, we are not sponsored by them. I should actually reach out and see if she ever wants to collaborate, because I think she'd be a pretty neat person to chat with, Philip, actually. Yeah.
Oh, big time. Because they have reached out, not in a kind of, oh, do you want to do a crossover way? No, just in a positive way of saying, oh, I seen you and Rachel doing the show the other day, blah, 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 love your work.
Really?
Da, da, da.
Oh, wow, nice.
Because, it was when we were using one of their sources. I can't remember which source it was. And I asked them, was it okay if I used it for the thing? And they got back to me and they said, yeah, no problem. Whenever you want, just make sure you reference it the classic way. And then there was something else where they wanted to use one of my sources as well for something else, or they were just sharing something with me as well. So they've contacted me a few times on Instagram, going back and forth, and they really are.
They're the kind of historians I like. Right? They're open. Yeah. They're ready to evolve with the information, always curious and ready to share. So medievalist.net for the win. So this article, this was mentioned 100%. Maybe last week on medievalist.net or 2 weeks ago. Time is moving at a strange pace for me. Relatively recently, though, this was referenced on under their news. If you go to their website, medievalist.net, and go to click on news under the 3 bars, then there is an article here. Yep.
Well, the reason why it came back up on my radar again this week was, this week it came back up on my radar again, is because it's finally gotten to the museum itself. It's not on main display yet. It's actually in the back, and they're actually trying to study it right now, especially with the skeleton and stuff, because they're trying to identify. They've identified that it's around the age 40, but they're ultimately trying to identify where the skeleton is from. And there was something else as well. Basically, everything to do with it. They're doing tests on the skeleton itself to basically find its origins and everything to do. Oh, its diet and all that stuff. How the skeleton would have died, etc., etc. So they're really, for the time being, the skeleton is in the museum. And for the next year, they are doing deeper research into the bones.
You know, it's interesting. If the skeleton still has teeth, because they don't always, but if he still has teeth, they can actually, and it still has enamel, they can, if they're relatively well preserved, they can actually examine them to check for minerals and certain markers that were deposited during childhood growth that will indicate possibly where this person actually grew up. So they might be able to pull that kind of evidence out too.
It does seem to be indicating that way from what I was reading, was it third sources and stuff, but it does seem to be indicating that way, to be quite honest with you. It will be very exciting. I am very, very excited for this one, to be quite honest with you, in the next year or so, to see what would happen there. But obviously, guys, you have to subscribe to see what the end conclusion is next year.
That's right. Yeah. So yeah. Anything else about our ice cream shop night?
I think that's pretty much it. The other archaeological work that's been done on the site is on the fortification itself. The fortification itself is a Teutonic castle. It was destroyed in 1404, from my knowledge, and it was actually destroyed by the locals. So the Teutonic Knight were pushed out, and then the locals came over and destroyed the castle itself, because of the Teutonic Knights. They were not nice people. The locals did not like, so the local Prussians, the local Polish, and the Lithuanians, the territories that they occupied, a lot of them were destroyed. And sadly, in Prussia itself, there was still castles standing when the Prussians had taken over from the Teutonic Knights. However, sadly, because of politics that was I'm not going to go into, obviously, but because of politics that happened after the Second World War, a lot of those castles were just demolished. But I'm not going to go into details.
Well, they didn't even survive World War II for the most part. I mean, that's the problem with Central European castles, is that Central Europe has basically been the crossroads of warfare since nation states started forming in the 17th century. And so, if Sweden wants to have a war with France, where do they do it? In Germany. If Russia wants to have a war with France, where do they do it? In Germany, or in Poland, right? In those lands right there. So the castles, they don't survive real well. They just haven't survived. England has a lot of really well preserved castles, because apparently from the Middle Ages onward, no one decided to hold their wars there. They just had their own little civil war or whatever. But
they kind of just walked by
it. They intentionally ruined some castles as part of the Civil War to make a statement to royalists that ye shall never rise again, or what nonsense. But for the most part, castles are pretty well preserved. Spain, once Los Reyes Católicos unified the country, there's kind of no, there was the Spanish War for Independence, but it was nothing like the Napoleonic Wars on the continent. So, finding well-preserved medieval castles in Central Europe, that's a fool's errand. That's hard.
It's the pain of it. Back over to the comment section there. Brian, 100% agree. It did remind me of Richard II, Richard III as well, when he was under the
Leicester car park, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then you see, this is where it could have turned into a political madness as well, and they made a movie about it as well, and they kept highlighting the fact that it was don't get me wrong, they did get very, very lucky that it was Richard III, but geez, it was a very politically generated, and also on top of that, very biased as well. The fact that everybody was like, this is Richard III, and then all the politics that was on top of it as well. Like, there's a very good reason why they made a movie about it afterwards, and there was definitely a lot to learn from it.
Agreed. And it turned out that it was Richard III, as you said. So all's well that ends well, but they started dropping the name Richard III long before they confirmed it. So that could have gone real bad, real fast for the people in charge. Yeah.
Has found out that I'm just making it up on the spot, though. Just stop it. You're lying. Yeah, I'm just making it all up. What was it called? Okay, so that's pretty much me. I think that's everything I needed to cover on that slide.
Let's see. I'm not certain who this. I think we might need to block someone. There might be someone there in the comments we need to block.
Yeah, he's just having a complete. If you're watching the re-recording or this, or you just don't see the comments, there's somebody having a mental breakdown called in the comment section, and he's just writing stop, just stop.
Okay,
we'll have to
I've put him in
right?
timeout for now. We'll see.
All right.
Okay.
Just to relax for a wee bit.
So,
want to be. Oh, the 15th century remake of. To be honest with you, I would have that movie set in the 11th
or earlier
century.
10th century, right? Yeah, so early. You're right, early 11th century. Yeah, because that's why that's interesting. Why would it be a 15th century remake of Macbeth? Because Macbeth is a real historical character who lived in the 11th century. Yeah,
but don't get me wrong. I think he would work great in the 15th century, because I think when Shakespeare had put it together, he had more of that kind of 15th century feel of what is medieval history. So yeah, I think you're right. It would work great in the 15th century. I'm a bit biased. I would have it in the 11th century, but 15th century, because of the energy of Shakespeare, I do see it working for the 15th century clothing at just that 15th century atmosphere.
I mean, Shakespeare is kind of timeless, so we could easily make it about the Nazi regime or something like that. But the way they did that fantastic rendition of Richard III with Ian McKellen, oh my God, the best version of Richard III, just absolutely fantastic. Have you seen the Richard III set in World War II?
I've seen different interpretations of it.
No, this is Ian McKellen. It's a movie. It's only a movie. It's not a play, and you have to go watch it. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. Ian McKellen is Richard III. He is, for me, he will always be Richard III. At least Shakespeare's villain is Richard III, which has nothing to do with the historical Richard III. I would like to put that out there for everyone to hear. I am a Ricardian. I'm not a Henrician.
Oh, you're like myself, so no, I'm pure York as well.
York forever.
No, I say I grew up in Mallow, where we have like Mallow Castle and stuff, and that was a Fitzgerald castle, and the Fitzgeralds were allied to the Yorkists, so I have no say in the matter. Okay, so what's happening up in the Battle of Wakefield?
So this actually transitions really fantastic. So we're talking about the Yorks. So the Battle of Wakefield. Have you ever heard of the Battle of Wakefield? First off, just out of curiosity. Yeah, of course you have, right? Yeah. So it apparently probably wasn't a battle. Oh yeah. Okay. So this is why at the beginning, when we were just sort of casually chatting, I was directing the conversation towards how we interpret history, how we know about history, what sources inform us. And it turns out that the idea that Wakefield was an actual battle is a product of Tudor propaganda. And
that's in the
and propaganda might be too strong a word, but Tudor historians. So there are two historians who have recently delved into Paul Dawson and David Grumet. Paul Dawson and David Grumet, and I honestly don't know how Grumet. I don't know how it's pronounced, but these are two very, very renowned historians in military history, and they've been examining documents from the War of the Roses. Primary source, not the Tudor stuff, but documents from the era. And they have come to the conclusion that the Battle of Wakefield was not a battle. It wasn't even a skirmish. It wasn't even a conflict. That Richard, Duke of York, who was a pretender for the throne, he was in 1460, he was trying to take the throne. He was not killed in a battle. He was ambushed and slaughtered. And that later on, Tudor historians Polly de Virgil and Edward Hall concocted this whole thing about the glorious, the ill-fated yet noble death of Richard, Duke of York, and how he rode out from the castle of Sandal Castle and met with Lancastrian forces and was full-heartedly met them. He should have known better, and he was struck down nobly on the field of battle. It turns out that didn't happen at all. And in fact, the date that is commonly attributed to Richard, Duke of York's death is incorrect. Yeah, so they've actually been looking at lawsuits, of all things, lawsuits from 1460, issued by one of the servants, lodged by one of the servants, one of Richard of York's closest servants, where he's actually suing people for wrongful death and for theft of property. Yeah. So there's no actual primary source evidence contemporary with this Battle of Wakefield that actually identifies it at all as a battle. And
okay, so I definitely, the more you're saying, the more my brain is going, that's in the realm of possibility, because Henry what was it called? Henry VII, well, the future Henry VII, when he arrived in Wales, majority of his army, they did specialize in ambush tactics.
But this is like 25 years before that. So, this is 25 years before. So Henry VII isn't even like, he's like maybe just having been recently born. So I wouldn't say that as anything, because this is well before him. This is when, you still potentially have Henry VI on the throne, right? So this is way before that. But what they're finding is that I don't know if you've ever heard. Did you hear about the legend, it's actually a legend of Richard's head having been, cut off and put on the wall with a paper crown on it? That's a Shakespearean invention. That really? Maybe that is probably springs back or stems from this historian of Henry VIII's, Edward Hall. So it's not even vague. There's zero contemporary reference to that at all. So they've been really delving into looking again, eisegesis versus exegesis of history. They've come at it from a perspective of, what does the evidence actually tell us of the people who were present, of the sources from the actual time. And it seems that it could be, interestingly, that it might not even be all Tudor propaganda. It could be Yorkist newsletters that are the origin of this story. Because the idea is that our great hero, Richard, our Duke, was struck down vilely. And even though he stood a noble battle, and so it was, they suspect there might have been some newsletters passed around to encourage people to take retribution on the Lancastrian forces. That could, but they haven't found, that's a theory. They haven't actually found any of these newsletters to confirm that. So who knows? Some more evidence may come out as people explore archives, but
it's still very exciting because of the fact that it does question, okay, so as you point out there, Tudor propaganda, why would Tudor propaganda make the Yorkists look like the victim? Like, what's going on here? Or at least glorify the great victories of the Yorkists later on. Why would they do that? And vice versa. Why would the Yorkists then, glorify or change or manipulate? Like, what's fully going out there? So we haven't seen the full picture yet of where these academics are going with this argument, but they've definitely grabbed my attention anyway, to, say the least.
There's a full paper available for free on academia.edu. For those of you who don't know, they've published it. So it's called The Battle of Wakefield 1460 Reconsidered. Very, very, very obvious title. And it is on academia.edu. For those who don't know that website, it is a place where you can have access to amazing free academic papers on an insane array of topics. So definitely go check that out if you want to see the whole article. The evidence is pretty damn convincing.
Yeah. And I definitely want to know what people think as well, because anytime information starts moving like this, you've got people popping out of the woodwork room to say, damn, this is revisionist agenda. This is A, B, and C. And hey, look, you could be right. Like, that's why I wanted to see your comments here and see what you see. So we want the truth. That's what we ultimately want here. So the question is, and you see, the thing is, and we have to keep highlighting it over and over again, is that even in the period itself, it wasn't even referred to as the Wars of the Roses. This is full-on Tudor propaganda. That's why we need to full-on question, okay, so what's reality here and what's propaganda? And as you've just pointed out here, hey, look, the Yorkists are doing the same thing even before the end of the war. They're rewriting exactly what's happening in front of them. So I definitely want to know what people's views on this. Is this just another academic who has an agenda, or does he have solid evidence here to back up that could end up reinventing our interpretation
like
of what's
rewriting
going on? Like, so it's
exactly. So some other evidence they looked at. One of my favorite things, you hear me talk about expense accounts all the time. You might be sick of me dropping the word expense account, but expense accounts are so revelatory because they're unbiased. They are the most workaday, authentic documents you can get from any period, because it is literally just money incoming, money outgoing. What did we spend money on? What did we receive money for? And so from Sandal Castle, they have expense accounts from this exact date. And from 1460, there are no extraordinary expenditures on provisioning an army. There's no extraordinary expenditures on supporting an army. And Sandal Castle itself, which, by the way, I think that's the ruin there in that picture. It wasn't big enough to host an army. There wasn't a place to host an army, but yet history records Richard as standing on the parapets of, and commanding his army from there. But there's zero evidence that his army, that he was even there in this time, let alone that an army was somehow being garrisoned there, because it couldn't have happened. It wasn't big enough. The expense accounts don't support that in any way, shape, or form. Now, what I don't know is if they also at the same time went and looked at the expense accounts for his personal household. But those would just say he had an army. It wouldn't say where they were. But Sandal Castle would have a record. Their records would indicate, oh, by the way, we're now feeding 100 extra mouths or 1,000 extra mouths, or we have to provide horse meat, which is food for horses, right? Like that, there would be something. It wouldn't just be business as usual. So yeah, I have to say that these two, and I mean, these guys actually have like PhDs and I don't. So, I mean, me complimenting them on their work is maybe a hollow compliment to them, but they've looked.
I just want to say as well, we are the messengers here. We're not the academics writing this.
Right, exactly. This is me reporting their research. But I have to say the kind of sources they're looking into are exactly the kind of sources I would look into. I would look at the legal records. I would look at the expense accounts. I would look at, if I can find it, diaries or journals of people living in that area, reporting sort of the work at what the hell is happening, right? You never know what kind of things you might find in these unexpected places, instead of just the great chronicles, right? You have to get chronicles, ladies and gentlemen. Philip, chronicles. Do you take chronicles at face value from the historians of courts? Do you just accept that as being 100% fact and truth?
Well, the problem is all our literature is written from the Nails, one family, talking about all the other families they had just finished a war with. So they'll literally have a war with the Onachta. Or the Onachta books have magically disappeared. So we don't even have the Onachta interpretation from Cashel. The Onachta used to live here in Cashel, and their books have disappeared. But we do have the Annals of Ulster, which is written by the Nail, the family they were fighting with. And they're the ones that's the history books we're living off of. So, do I trust what they're saying? Maybe not. Maybe not.
Yeah, and that's why I'm always harping on archaeological evidence, documentary evidence, and iconographic evidence. And in the case of documentary evidence, you need multiple sources. You can't just trust Shakespeare, right?
Yeah, that's very, very true. And it is exciting as well, because as Mike has pointed out there, clearly the Battle of Wakefield, that would have archaeological finds and stuff. Like what's going to be the response there and stuff. So yeah, I'm definitely excited to see. I definitely sit down and read the paper and stuff. And then what I'm excited to see is the counter argument, because I can't see a lot of historians turning around and accepting this. I can see a lot of counter argument.
Absolutely. It should be quite interesting. I mean, so they're not saying there wasn't violence. There was absolutely violence. Richard died. I mean, 100%. He and his men died. They were slaughtered. There's no doubt. But he was traveling with his baggage train, so there were lots of goods there. So of course, if he was slaughtered, it's not like they just said, "Oh, you've got us, kill us now." There was fighting. It was a violent encounter, but it was not this great pitched battle. What they're arguing.
Yeah. And yeah, you're perfectly right. A PhD doesn't. All a
Absolutely.
PhD does is show that you spent a lot of time reading books. And that was by another doctor, by the way, who said that. He turned around and says, hey, guys, anybody can criticize their work. All it says here is that this guy spends his full time reading this book, and the rest of us don't have that, luxury to do so. Anybody can criticize our work, and we're actually opening the floor. Me and Rachel, the messenger. We want to hear your interpretation. Do you think this is complete garbage, or do you think
listen to you triggering the algorithm, dropping words like complete garbage?
Go on, get the comments there. Go on, fight. Give me the comments. But no, it is exciting, and I'm looking forward to the counter arguments, especially with that kind of title, like there was no battle, it was only an ambush. I can see a lot of historians waking up that morning, especially to do with the Wars of the Roses, the likes of Matt Easton and stuff, who have made an entire career about the defenses of the Battle of Wakefield, waking up and going, geez, I have to debunk this or my career's destroyed.
Well, in fairness, this article has been peer-reviewed and published in a journal, so these aren't just two fly-by-night alien conspiracy historians coming up with bullcrap, when they're high on something. So, and I do have to say that also in fairness, the reason I've never gotten a PhD isn't because I don't love reading and studying and learning. It's because I don't want to go through the gauntlet that you have to traverse to get your PhD on the other side. It is a nest. Like, you have to defend that what you've written, that what you know, to people who are literally trying to tear you apart at the molecular level. So PhD is more than just reading a lot. You have to go through quite a trial by fire kind of thing to come out on the other end with a PhD. So I don't want to downplay the effort it takes to get a PhD from a reputable institution. Obviously, I'm not talking about the PhD you bought from Phoenix Online or whatever, right?
There is endless amount of young history YouTubers who were around the age of 23, 24, 25, and they felt pressured because they were doing so successful on YouTube. They felt that it was the natural thing to do was to rush themselves into a PhD. It was the biggest car crash ever for them. They had no idea what they were doing. They just didn't have a clue. The only people I actually know who successfully not only got the PhD, did insanely well with the PhD, were people who spent years in the system. One of the best examples is Matt Easton and his whole clique. He's got him and his armor friends, I can't remember specifically their names, but you would naturally assume that, oh, well, maybe they've been doctors all their life. No. They only recently, in their 50s and their 60s, got their PhD, and they spent years working in the museums, gathering the contacts, gathering the information, and then finally went for their PhD. So yeah, it is a complete gauntlet. And then once you're committed, that's your whole name and career. You're committed to this book, so you really want to get it right the first time around.
And Brian Bonnet says it, like, writing dissertations is not easy at all. And then once you write your 600-page dissertation, you then have to defend it against people, like I said, who want to eviscerate you to make sure that you prove yourself, right? When I called it running the gauntlet, I really I'm confident to people who've done the process, like they are being beaten on all sides. So, and that's that's why I have no interest in it's just no.
I would love to do it when I get into my 50s and 60s, and I've got that solid foundation behind me. And that's if I have the solid foundation behind me, because exactly what you said there, I've seen endless amount of children. Literally, they be age. I know it sounds bad, but compared to the amount of information that they need, they're only very much on the beginner's level, and they'd be aged between 23, 20. I'm not saying it's impossible. There's a lot of people that get over the wall, but a lot of them, age 23, 24, your possibility to have that much wealth of knowledge is very, very much limited. And I'm not saying it for everyone. I do know people that manage to get over the wall, but for a lot of other people, especially myself, Mihal over in Cans and Dynasties, we're planning on taking that step back, spending years building up that body of information, and then launching ourselves in. And then it becomes a thing of not the universe, not us trying to suck off the university, but the university trying to, they need us, not the other way around. And that's the advantages of if you had that strong foundation behind you. Because with Matt Easton, when himself and his clique went for their PhDs to specialize in the Wallacean collection, it was the universities that they were connected to needed them because of their connections with the Wallacean collection, not the other way around. And it was the same thing for a lot of my other friends who were doing their PhD. I have a friend, she spent years in law, and then she didn't go for her PhD in history until she was in her 50s or 60s. And then it was a constant case of University College of Cork needing her, not the other way around. And that's what you need to be at.
No, I agree. So Takeda, I don't know if you heard my answer. So the question is, if there was no Battle of Wakefield, why are there artifacts? And I'll just readdress that just in case I don't know how out of line the question is with that I answered it at one point. We're not saying there was a violent encounter. That is Richard ended up dead at the end of it, and many of his men. But the point is that it seems that he was actually traveling with his baggage train and his people through that area, and that they were ambushed while traveling. So there was a skirmish. I mean, there was a violent encounter, a violent conflict. Weapons were drawn. No doubt if it was an ambush, arrows were fired, right? So there is going to be debris from a violent encounter. They're not debating that nothing, they're not saying nothing happened. What they're saying is it wasn't a pitched battle, and calling it the Battle of Wakefield is probably misleading, is their point, right? So yes, a violent thing happened. Richard, Duke of York, pretender to the throne, ends up dead at it. English history is changed forever, right? Like, can you imagine if he had succeeded instead and become the next King Richard, if that Richard had become the next King Richard, like no Reformation, instantly, no English Reformation. So yeah, obviously it's a pivotal moment and a very pivotal violent thing happened. Their argument is that it was not the pitched battle that everyone keeps talking about.
Yeah, it definitely would have altered history, especially the Irish perspective as well, because the reason why the Irish are connected into all of this is because the Fitzgeralds were allied with Richard of York, because the Fitzgeralds were trying to get more and more independence away from the London court at the time. And what's it called? I think it was James. Oh, yeah, James Fitzgerald, James the Usurper Fitzgerald, had allied himself with the Yorkists because he was pushing to not just become Lord Deputy against the butlers, but also for that full power. So yeah, you could imagine even Irish history would be completely changed as well. So it is interesting to get that point.
Did a fighter jet just take off near you? Okay. Yeah.
I swear I'm not up to anything.
You can tell I'm military adjacent. Like I recognize that sound. That's a fighter jet.
Wait, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm in quite old Ireland here. Can I see Cashel in the background? Hello, Onapta, huh? Fighter jet. I don't know what you're on about.
Oh my God.
Sorry, I'm not up to anything.
Yeah, so this whole thing is just really fascinating to me because it also underscores what you and I keep saying, is that history is not set in stone, right? That new resources, new evidence is constantly coming to light, which is why history is not this dead field, this one line epic that just is read out and memorized, right? It's discovered, it's interpreted, it's reinterpreted, and it's we should be constantly questioning that we know what we know, in my opinion.
Oh, 100%. Like we said that on the opening with Christina there, is the fact that at the very start we had our interpretation, which was a very nationalist interpretation of, Ireland versus Norway. But in fact, it was a case of, families and families. One family was fighting another family. That doesn't mean that every Norse family was fighting every Irish family. In fact, it was completely mixed. Even the other day I was saying on a live stream, I was saying that Cashel was fighting Cork. And then suddenly Cork goes off and hires a load of Viking mercenaries who marry the local Irish women, So, of course, those Cork people would think Norway and all Norse things, that was absolutely amazing. castle on their hand. They hated all the Vikings until Limerick Vikings rocked up, and they got on great with the Limerick Vikings, and that's what makes it such a blur.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
And
know. So yeah,
go on.
So it's not our old interpretation was very 19th century, and even the Wars of the Roses, that whole like English country civil war, they still say country today when it wasn't even a country, it was a realm of families disputing with each other while they were trying to come back together again so they could take back, you know, their territories and their realms in France, you know. And it was still in that blur of, okay, are we the English of the Isle of England or are we French? You know, they were still even in that blur,
and I mean, you know, it didn't help that in this time, you know, a lot of the English aristocracy still did have lands in France that they managed, and that they would frequently go and be there in France, managing their land, speaking French, by the way. So yeah,
but that's the thing, like, we're trying to look at this from a very nationalist perspective, and they had no understanding of a nationalist perspective. Like, even that 100 years, I can literally talk all day about this, by the way, but even that perspective of the 100 Years' War, England versus France, and it's like, oh yeah, we just forget about Burgundies there. Burgundies never existed, you know.
So good question there, Brian Bonnet. How much historical documentation do we have regarding the skirmish that ended the life of the Duke? And if we do you know the general story? How did they know where he would be to ambush him? Yeah, so this is all, etc. Yeah, exactly. So precisely. I don't know if they're questions. Maybe I think you're positing rhetorically, which I totally agree with. And this is why these historians are now re-examining what we do know, based on the actual contemporary evidence. And it's so important to get as contemporary as you can, because the further you get from time of the event, the more creative history seems to become.
Yeah.
So,
especially with Shakespeare.
Right. Oh God. And let me tell you, I know everyone says, "Oh, Shakespeare was a hack. He was a plagiarist." No. Everyone in this era, from the 14th century forward, everyone is taking what are common folk tales and writing them in their own voice and adding their own style and twist and plot lines to them. So yeah, Shakespeare based most of his works on either histories that he didn't create or stories that were folk stories or legends. But it's not the story itself that's amazing. It's how he wrote about it, right? It's the depth of his characters. It's his mastery of the English language. It's his level of metaphor and allusion and allegory. In some cases, his psychology is remarkably forward-looking. So just because his histories might not be historical doesn't mean they're not worth watching. Just don't watch them for your next history test.
Oh yeah, that's definitely very true. Kind of stick to the books.
Right,
maybe that's probably best, or at least what your teacher's trying to say anyway. I mean, what route was he taking when he was leaving or moving or ambush? I don't know. Rachel, have you read the
so exactly they are what they have found. It can be hard to know those kinds of details, right? Because you're exactly right. How do we know? Well, they're looking at things like these lawsuits that provide affidavits that detail these 1460 lawsuits that include affidavits that provide details like that. So that's where they're getting that kind of information. So yeah, if you're interested in seeing what this potentially revolutionary new interpretation of history might be, go to academia.edu. Hold on a minute. The Battle of Wakefield, 1460 Reconsidered. Highly recommend. It's freely available. You don't even have to pay for access.
Yeah, because just to highlight again, we're the messenger here. We're not actually like, don't crucify us. We're just the messenger here. Because I haven't even, to be honest with you, I haven't even looked at the paper yet. I will be looking at the paper afterwards because it's very, very important for a lot of project work that I am doing right now. And when people because the project work I'm doing, which is helping a few lads put together, battles and stuff. And Rachel's done a tiny bit of helping as well for the lads. But the thing is that these guys want a battle to be there. So I think it's very important that I understand what's going on. So we can turn around and say, yeah. There's a lot of, even Matt Easton, he's put a lot of work into this kind of stuff. So to turn around to say, actually, there was no battle whatsoever. This was all made up. It's like, oh, Jesus.
So it's not that bad. There was a violent encounter Richard ends up dead at the end of it. English history has changed. World history has changed forever. But was it a pitched battle? It's looking like not, based on the evidence that these gentlemen have presented. I'm leaning more towards the not a pitched battle side of the equation.
Yeah, because the Battle of Killstown wasn't a battle, and it's the same with the Battle of Boyne that happens in Ireland as well. But the Battle of Killstown isn't really a battle because it is Roger Mortimer. He flies. He's dressed as a Kern. He's drunk, by the way. This is the explanation for everything mad that happens. He's dressed. He rocks up on the battlefield dressed as a Kern. And instead of keeping to his line formation, he flies off on his horse. He's on a hobler horse, and he goes flying off into the lines of the opposing side, which is full of light infantry Kerns. And they don't know who this guy is because he's dressed as a Kern, being mad and drunk. And so when he bashes into their line, they kill him and they cut his head off and they show his head around the place because they don't know who they just decapitated. And so what was his name? Byrne comes running over, the head of the clan, and he's like, this is Roger Mortimer, blah, blah, blah. And then they find out afterwards, they just killed one of the biggest nobles in England. And that just turns into a full-blown skirmish instead of it wasn't originally meant to be a full-on battle. So anytime people are talking about the Battle of Killstown, technically speaking, was it even a skirmish because of the fact that Roger Mortimer was killed in the first few seconds of the battle.
That is very interesting. But also I love the image of him flying off of his hobbler horse, because for those who don't know, hobbler horse is where we get the word hobby horse from. And their horse is a really strong word. They're practically ponies. And so they're not like you're not far off the ground. So it would be a little silly to even get thrown from one, honestly.
100%. Because they're not made for, Roger Mortimer charged into the Kern line with them. They're not made for charging. You run around the battlefield just throwing a javelin. That's what they're there for. So you'd have young fellas, young boys between the age of 14 to 25 who'd be on these hobbler horses just throwing javelins and then just running away into the forest. Great for skirmish fighting. Great for Irish warfare. Not good for English warfare, and not good for charging into Irish lines or anyone's lines.
That's cavalry charge, not their strong suit at all.
Yeah. But the alcohol explains
everything.
A lot.
It's always, you can always take it back to chemical abuse, chemical substance abuse.
Yeah. Right. So we have excellent news for Alice Robbins. I'm probably butchering that one. But she's gone off and won the award for Best Archaeologist Book of the Year for her book, Crypt, Life, Death and Disease in the Middle Ages. Absolutely. Very, very, their hands were kind of tied in on their back for this one because they couldn't vote for anyone else. Because allegedly this book is very, very, very important because it goes through all the new techniques that they have brought in, all the new technology, all that sort of stuff, and all the new finds they had going back over all the old skeletons, all the old archaeological finds. Alice Roberts has gone off and composed an entire book to update all of the new information that's happened. And so because of that, it was an easy win for herself going off and win Archaeologist Book of the Year 2025 because you kind of have to buy the book now to update all the information from the St. Brice's Day Massacre that happened around the 10th century, which was when the Anglo-Saxons went and butchered all of the Danes living up in Northumberland in modern-day York, all the way up to Thomas Becket. Study was done into him, and various diseases that had broken out as well in Europe. And we also cover the skeletons from the Black Death Plague and various new DNA studies and research that's being done into all of this. So you're dealing with information from 1000 AD all the way up to what's called the 16th century. So there's so much new information here to update you in all the new stuff that's been going on. And so, of course, this is stuff we already knew before, but with modern technology, it's telling us even more new information. So, of course, if you're going to pick up any book this year to do with archaeologists, you have to, by default, if you want to know what's actually going on in the conversation, you have to pick up this book. So it's an easy win,
Yeah.
So definitely a well done
Yeah,
for
it looks,
herself.
I don't know. I have a fascination with how wrong the human body can go. I don't know about you, but I love visiting museums about medical oddity museums where you can just see, oh my God, the body can do that. Like in Philadelphia, there's the Mutter Museum of Medical Oddities is disturbing, but also fascinating. If you're ever in Philadelphia, everyone go to the Mutter Museum of Medical Oddities. You'll be horrified. Go on an empty stomach. But that ties in with this because, she's examining such a cross section of skeletal remains of graves that, she's covering a pretty, it's not just the Black Death, right? We're looking at all kinds of things, leprosy, other kinds of pathogens and contagions. And, what's interesting about that is how that causes populations to evolve. And in some cases, apparently, these diseases, these chronic or pandemic level diseases can mutate our DNA in a way that it makes us stronger for to resist that particular disease, but it weakens us for other diseases. For example, the Black Death apparently set us Europeans up to be more prone to viruses like COVID-19. Specifically those kind of viruses. So we're good against bubonic plague, but we're not so great against these other things. So that's some very interesting stuff, and I love that she's got archers. She's examined archers from the Mary Rose. The Mary Rose is such a fascinating shipwreck. This Henry VIII ship that goes down wholesale in the channel. Half of it ends up in the mud, and the part that's in the mud of the channel is almost perfectly preserved. And and it's finally raised, and they excavate, and they find out all these amazing details about daily life. But the bodies that they found on board were equally interesting. People think. People think the Mary Rose goes down in the 1540s, and everyone thinks, black powder. Well, no, there are archers on board, right? So that's fascinating. Everyone thinks, by the 16th century, warfare has moved on from protecting ships with sort of non black powder ballistics, but nope. Yes.
No, longbows still get the job done. And longbows are amazing. Right? And as what was it called? Comment section is pointing out there, the changes then that you could now study the actual bones of the longbowman is very, very important for our study throughout the entirety of the 14th and 15th century. So I fully agree with the comment section as well. Getting those skeletons back to land and studying them is very, very important. And hopefully with the new modern technology to go back over it, we can get you can find out more information of the, as you were pointing out there, the, would you call it damage, the way the bones have developed because of constantly firing off the bow again and again since they were small.
They've got longbowmen have this weird, they've got this like arch developing in their back, and like one arm severely overdeveloped. The bone gets really big versus the other. Christina says the skeleton of a dog was found in the Mary Rose. Yes, it was. Sadly, the ship's dog. The ship's dog went down with the ship. Very kind of sad.
Poor guy.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So definitely, this is a book I think I need to read. But Condottiero, that is not an excuse to go buy another book. We can get it on interlibrary loan, please. It's got a shopping habit. That's a problem. Let's see.
I do as
comment.
Well.
Very interesting. I was just thinking about the effect of the plague because we have squirrels around in Northern California that have tested positive from the fleas that pass it around. Interesting. Yep. And yet there we are resisting it.
It is what it is.
So have you gotten to read the book yet or not yet?
I haven't. I've gone through the first few pages of it this morning, but I haven't gone into the proper deep meat of it yet. It does seem very, very interesting, to be quite honest with you. It's my wife, Yuki. She's an archaeologist who specializes in bones, and she's the one. Her face will completely light up because she doesn't know that I've gotten it yet. So her face will completely light up when I see her. So that will be absolutely magnificent for her because she has her books are over there. And the books that she brought over from Ireland over here, majority of those archaeological books are books that specialize on bones. She loves bones. I looked at most of these topics here, and as you said, that the way that the bones are shaped and developed and changed because of the likes of syphilis or the bone development to do the long bone man. My wife loves all that stuff. She's very, very clever when it comes down to all that kind of stuff. She's gone off to become an accountant right now, so she doesn't really get to get into the deep meat of her love or anything, but she's still, her heart skips a beat when she looks at this sort of stuff. She's definitely excited about that. Also on top of that as well, I also just included as a side note as well that there is an Irish book that came over. If you're into this kind of book, but you want to look at it from more of an Irish perspective, there is a book that also covers the bones and the grave goods and stuff as well, called Death in Irish Prehistory. It covers everything just before, from around the Bronze Age Ireland all the way up to just before the arrival of Niall of the Nine Hostages around 400 AD. So just before the medieval period, it covers a good chunk of burial goods around that period and stuff. So if you're into Irish history from around the Bronze Age into the Iron Age and then into the late antiquity in Ireland, definitely a book to get a hold of, to be quite honest with you, if you're into that sort of stuff. I have tons and tons of friends that definitely are, and definitely will be getting the two of them, especially my wife.
Good stuff.
I think on mine, depending on which way the slide is, I might give the two books in the next slide.
I interspersed our stuff, so it would be, yeah.
That's grand. I'll show you next to that.
But we are way ahead somehow. Okay, what the heck happened here? Right, that's good. There we go. Okay, this
coming out again.
Hitting the whatever. Okay. So, how many of you have been to Venice? Obviously, I won't see a show of hands, but Philip, have you ever been to Venice?
Venice, sadly, no. I have been to Italy and I've been around Italy and stuff, but I still haven't gone into Venice. Last time I was in Italy, I had a friend, because it was tourism season, my friend refused to go to Venice because of all the lines, the crowds and stuff. And they were promising, they turned around and says, no, next time you come to Italy, we can go to Venice, but not right now. We're not going right now. They just could not stand large tourists and stuff. So at the time, this was before coronavirus, before I went off to Asia. So it's like, yeah, I'll definitely go to go back to Italy. Oh. Never happened. Never got back to Italy.
Yeah. So don't visit Venice at high time. Don't go during Carnivale. So that's like February, March. Do not go during the summer. Don't go over any major school breaks. You will regret your life choices. But it is a cliche. Venice is absolutely still worth visiting. That being said, we're talking about revising our understanding of history. The St. Mark's Lion is one of these statues that's iconic for Venice, because of course St. Mark the Evangelist is represented by the winged lion in Christian iconography, in traditional and historic Christian iconography, and St. Mark is the patron saint of Venice. And has been since at least the 14th century. So here we have our 13th century. So here we have this very famous statue. Have you ever seen this winged statue before? St. Mark's Lion?
I've seen, not this specific one, no, but I have seen similar versions.
So this one is extremely famous, and this one has had a hard life. You may be able to see I'm trying to see if that makes it bigger. You may be able to see that, he's got parts of him are brighter green than other parts, and because those are replacement parts. So
makes sense.
There's been this mystery surrounding the origin of this statue. Was it cast in the 12th century in Venice? Some people have said it comes from ancient Persia. Some people say ancient Greece. Some say, this place or that place. And so finally, scientists and archaeologists have worked together. Art historians have come together to examine it. And the evidence is pointing at it as actually being originally a Tang Dynasty tomb guardian. And the tomb guardian in question is called Mu. Okay, everyone, I'm sorry. I should have proofread my own stupid thing. That is completely misspelled. It should be a Zhenmu Shou. So that should be U in the middle, OU at the end. So a Zhenmu Shou is a tomb guardian from the Tang Dynasty. And they were these mythical lion creatures. And, they're supposed to protect the entrance to a tomb. Of course, we all know many tombs ended up raided, so apparently it didn't work so well. But the reason that first, there's so much evidence that this thing comes from Tang Dynasty China, but the most convincing evidence is hard scientific. They took samples of the lead from all over different parts of the line, the parts that haven't been replaced, because lots of parts have been replaced. It's like Theseus' ship, this poor thing. And they found out that the isotopes pinpointed very specifically to the Yangtze River in China. So this, for certain, at the very least, the lead originates in the Yangtze River in China. But it doesn't make any sense to me when you've got ample sources of lead in Europe, why you would import lead all the way from China if the lead wasn't already in the shape of something. So yeah, it's from Xanadu. Well, maybe not Xanadu, but yeah. So if you actually look at its nose, look at its face, look at that nose. That nose, the way its mouth is shaped, it's got these little like wavy things, little whiskers that coming up from its nose, and the sort of flat, stout nose. That is so typical Chinese lion, Tang Dynasty lion. So that's what sort of made the researchers first go, we don't think this is European at all, and it's certainly not ancient. It's certainly not Hellenistic. And so then they started actually peeling back layers of things that have been added over the centuries, and lots has been added. This poor statue, it's been taken apart and put back together. Napoleon took it apart, stole it, and took it to France, put it back. He literally had it hacked up into pieces, took it to France, installed it there, and then in 1815, when France finally lost the Napoleonic Wars, it was returned to Venice, had to be put back together again. Wings, those wings were added in like the 18th century or the 19th century. It actually had a wig. It has a wig that was added to it, a metal wig to cover up.
What are we doing, guys?
It actually has scars from where
I was following you until you said wig, and I was like, okay, guys, now I think we need to calm down now. Yeah. Like, the wings debatable, because like nice Venetian wings kind of gives it a spot, but the wig, come on, guys, what are we doing here?
This is because it needed to cover scars from where horns had been hacked off. Because the original Zhenmu Shou has horns. And so there's actually giant holes where they hacked them off, and its ears have been sawed down. It has all these scars from where it's been modified. And because it then had these literal holes in its head from where they took off the horns, they think because the wig actually has isotopes from the Yangtze River basin, they think that the horns were recast as this wig to cover a mane, basically, to cover up the holes. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a soul of its own.
Right? Yeah, this poor thing. It has had a hard life. Like, I mean, we humans do nasty things to ourselves for cosmetic purposes, but this poor baby didn't consent. Yeah, let's see what we've got going on in the comments.
Just to step back here, when was it originally dated that it that originated from China to Venice, etc.? Like how much information do we have from its origins?
So there's, of course, good question. It apparently can't be documented in Venice before the Polo brothers, before the Polo think before Marco Polo and his uncle and his father. So that's the 13th, 14th century. So it's not in Venice before that, as far as anyone can tell. Again, as far as anyone can tell, you can't prove a negative. You can only talk about evidence to the positive. And you can't carbon date metal. because its carbon date's going to be a long time ago, right? So that's why they went with the isotopes, with the radioisotopes, and specifically of the lead.
Yeah.
And that pinpoints it to the Yangtze River Basin. So it's comparing it against other Tang Dynasty style. Zhenmusho is what pinpoints at why they think it's Tang Dynasty, because they've compared it to dozens, if not hundreds, of other examples, because there's a lot of these that have survived in Tang Dynasty. So then your question is, well, how did it get to Venice?
Well, I just assumed it was the Silk Road. That's why I wasn't going to poke and prod too much.
That is always the easy answer, right? Any Chinese thing, any Eastern Asian thing that ends up in Europe in the Middle Ages, it's the Silk Road. But it might actually be more interesting than that. So the researchers who've done this research, they're not saying it's true, but they hypothesize that it could have actually been brought back by the Polo brothers and their son. Because at about this time, there's for whatever reason, there's a massive destruction of Buddhist sites, of Buddhist temples, of Buddhist art that's happening, and other art. And so it could be that they were given this as a gift to bring back with them, either because it wasn't considered valuable anymore, or because it was considered valuable and it was therefore a gift of honor. But they're not saying, they don't know that, right? They would need to find other evidence to confirm that. There's not a record saying that Marco brought back a tomb guardian with him, but they're saying that it coincides with their return to Venice and with the time that this lion is first documented in Venice, and that it becomes the sort of this Venice's symbol, that St. Mark's lion becomes Venice's symbol.
Yeah, because I know of symbols like that as well in Venice. Like, I'm pretty sure I've seen this before. Just didn't really delve too much into it. But now that it's, a part of, it gives more of that image of a magnificent trade Venice had. And it really does. I think the more people have delved into it, has really, really enriched not just the history of this statue alone, but the history of Venice, because, everyone seems to forget how connected Venice was with the bigger, wider world, especially with Asia and stuff, because we're having a lot of, this is what's bringing out majority of the arguments right now. Here, guys, I'm going to shoot the elephant in the room. Is the BBC's interpretation of, West Africans in the Anglo-Saxon military of the 9th century. They were portraying West Africans in it. Now, straight away, everyone else is, seeing the big red flag, which is West Africans in the Anglo-Saxon military. However, I'm looking at the clothing and thinking, well, it failed already. I don't know what you're debating about. Like, at least the other ones, at least that's a debate. The clothing is just, where are you even starting? This is fantasy from the get-go. Like, I don't know why people are worked up on it. And that's even before you go into what's happening in the script. To me, I don't know what the big deal is. This is a fantasy program you're watching here. Like,
right, exactly.
If this was the standard of Outlaw King, where everybody had perfect historical clothing, they were following the historical lines, and then you had a trader from Mali in there, then we could debate, okay, so would a trader from Mali make his way all the way from Camel, from Mali, all the way up to North Africa, from North Africa to Iberia, then from Iberia to Scotland? That's a good, healthy debate to have within a historical movie. That BBC thing is so far over there. What's the big deal here? It's already fantasy.
Right. Exactly. This was a fantasy production from the get-go. Who cares?
Exactly. That's my point. But it allowed me, and I did get a really good buzz off the old algorithm here, thumbs up for that, is the debate of, okay, so what is diversity in the medieval period? And God, this is such a good example of that. Really the fact that we have solid connection from Venice all the way over to China, and highlights, as I was saying there, my brain went, oh, well, it must be the Silk Road. And you're like, actually, no, we have the Polo brothers who've made their way back, and perhaps they've brought it over. Or if we go into other forms of literature that the crew over in God Medieval have highlighted, is the fact we do actually have the random Chinese guy who wakes up one day and goes, do you know what? Wouldn't mind going to Europe. And then just most likely because of pilgrims, there's a lot of Christian pilgrims who wake up one day and go,
there's a lot of Nestorian Christians in China. Yeah.
they turn around and went, "Do you know, I've been hearing a lot about this Jesus guy in Rome. Do you know what? I'm going to go off and see what the story is here." And they just take off. And one day they just appear in Europe, and Europeans are like, "Oh my God, look, it's a Chinese man. Let's make a big deal about him." So they do pop up in the historical records.
Right.
And then it comes into the whole thing of, okay, so who goes under the radar? Who doesn't get documented but suddenly appears? They're always even more exciting again. And I think this is, one of those incidences where we have something from this land far, far away suddenly appearing in Venice, and the investigation is just so exciting.
It really is. And yeah, so Takeda, great comments and questions. So Takeda said, did it have horns and longer ears? And I did sort of say this, but I'll answer that clearly for everyone. Yes. There, obviously you can't prove a negative, but there are scars on its head where things have been cut off, where on the extant Zhenmusho statues, there would be horns. So something in the position of Zhenmusho horns has been cut off. And the ears have absolutely been like sawed down. And if you look closely at it, which I did, I looked closely at the pictures and I thought, wow, that's literally a hack job. They didn't even try to make it look pretty. So yeah, the ears have been shorn, have been cut down to look like these ears, because the Zhenmusho ears are they stick up a lot like this. And the horns have been removed. And yeah, Takeda says it looks like its face looks like a kirin. Yeah, I absolutely agree. You know what a kirin is, don't you, Philip? Because you're over there in Japan. Yeah. I really, when I first looked at that, like the first time years ago, I thought a picture of the St. Mark's winged lion. I thought, wow, that kind of looks kind of Asian. Actually looks Chinese. And it turns out I wasn't wrong, probably.
Because especially here in Okinawa, those things are Okinawan version, by the way. It does not look like that over here, but we have those dogs everywhere. And I didn't even know it was. I used to say it was a dog. You know, the way it's all set up and stuff. Like
right. Yeah, it's funny. A lot of the way that creatures, especially mythological creatures, are depicted in Asian stylizations, whether it's in Korea, modern Korea, Japan, or China. To the Western eye, it's very hard for us to sometimes identify them as what they are. Like, it's like, is that a lion or is it a dog? Oh, it's a lion. Okay. I didn't know that.
I thought it was one of those, the Shih Tzu dogs, that Chinese type of dog. I thought it was that. I was in Okinawa walking around the place, and the two of them are together. One is making a scary face and one is making the funny face in Okinawa. And I thought they were little Shih Tzus. And I was like, God, they sure like Shih Tzus around here, don't they? Because they're in every single house. Because Okinawa, there's a lot of tons of ghost stories in Okinawa.
I know what the creatures you're talking about. Yeah, I've seen them in Okinawa. They're cute, but they're not Shih Tzus.
Oh, right. Yeah. No, that's what I thought they were. And it was Yuki. I said it one day to Yuki. I was walking by, I go, geez, they sure like Shih Tzus. And Yuki had to explain the whole history, but it also helped as well because we went to a museum that specializes in all this, and they covered the entire Asian side of things, and then the interpretation of this going through all of Asia and stuff. So I did get the bigger picture of these things.
Yeah, so we had a question, and I did say this, but I'll say it again just to be clear. The wings are original or added? So yes and yes. There were wings before. They can tell because there are traces of feathers on the shoulders from the original set of wings or the older set of wings. The wings that it currently has were cast in either the 18th or the 19th century, which is why if you look at it, like, why are the wings such a different, none of these parts are the same shade of green or patina, right? And that's because they're all different quantities of copper versus lead versus other metals. So yeah, the current wings are a neoclassical edition.
Comment section also brings up a very good point as well, that it may not have defaulted into Venice as well, depending on its journey. It could have maybe taken 500 years to go from China all the way over to Venice. It's not a case of it suddenly going straight to Venice. And so it may have had 500 years of modification going through its journey from China to Venice as well, which is also very, very true.
Yeah, there's exactly. There's so many possibilities that would only really thoroughly be filled in. Its journey could only really be informed by documentary evidence being found that at this point we don't have, but who knows? It could, we're discovering new documentary evidence all the time.
Oh yeah, big time. Relationship between Asia and Europe. just how it fits into the world. Yeah, the relationship between Asia and Europe is absolutely magnificent. We're very lucky to have the information of the Silk Road that we do have. A lot of information has been lost between the nomads up in the north as well, because a lot of people poke and prod myself lately, this week especially, to do with the relationship between the Asian nomads and the European nomads from the area around, I'd say, and Rachel probably correct me on this one, from around where Hungary is up into that kind of Russian area, and then over to where the Mongolians are stationed and stuff, and up to around North China and stuff. You're perfectly right in that one, where it is absolutely fascinating. So not only do we have the Silk Road going from what was it called? Constantinople, modern day Istanbul, all the way over into China. But we also have a lot of lost history as well that's going on with the nomads, how the nomads would pick up various bits and bobs from the north of China and then bring it up and around as they're, traveling about and stuff, and eventually having it come into, especially the areas of Hungary and Poland and stuff. And a lot of, lost information in there because, one trader trading to another, who knows, about these items and stuff.
Yep. No, absolutely. It's and the Silk Road definitely goes back. Like, people imagine the Silk Road as a medieval thing. The Silk Road starts in ancient times, everyone. The Silk Road literally starts when people in the West discover silk. and so, the Silk Road starts in ancient Rome. Like, it goes back that far. And of course, before that, there were also trade routes through the Persian Empire, right? Because there's always been a case of people on this side of the Eurasian continent have this product. People on the other side of the Eurasian continent have this other product. And there's always clever people in between who figure out that if they can just be the middleman, literally, that we can all get rich, right? It's these trade routes go back thousands of years in some cases. So it definitely goes back way further. And I think Siobhan, who said she's really curious about that relationship. So let me give you a really hard example from the 5th century. So here in Korea, where I currently am, one of my favorite places to be based out of in the world, this is the capital of the Shilla Empire, the Shilla dynasty. And there are these massive pyramid-sized hill tombs here that have been excavated, and amazing treasures have been found in them. And there's been a lot of ancient Roman glassware found intact in many cases, sometimes perfectly intact, in these tombs from the 5th century AD. So from Rome all the way to Korea. Korea is literally a peninsula sticking out in the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, right? So almost from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean was connected solidly and demonstrably with actual evidence. I can go to the local museum and look at these ancient Roman glassware here in Korea. So super connected.
Oh, massively, because there's a huge argument and debate right now, because there's a castle. I actually live next to a castle over there. Not this one, obviously. In real life, over there's a Okinawan castle. And inside the grounds of the Okinawan castle, they found Roman coins from Constantinople. And also there's another one as well from Rome. But they have a lot of ones from Constantinople. And the thing is, the debate is, okay, so how did it get to Okinawa? Because there's two. Okinawa doesn't just have one Silk Road trade, it's got two Silk Road trades. The main one, obviously, we know of is the one from China. So around South China, there's a trade link into Okinawa. But Okinawa is also the reason why Okinawa is referred to as the Ryukyu Kingdom and is also super rich in the medieval period, is because it's also connected to a port Silk Road that goes from here to Okinawa over to around, it kind of bends around the Philippines and over to Taiwan, and then goes over from Taiwan over to the Indonesian trade links, and then from the Indonesian
the Spice Islands, of course.
And then from the Indonesia area over to Thailand and that whole spot there, and then into India. So there's not just one Silk Road trade link into Okinawa. There's actually two of them, both the water trade link and the land trade link, which historians are only now starting to really focus on, especially since there's a lot of, it's starting to get a little bit quiet because of all the little bit proxy wars that are happening here and there and over the resources and stuff that you can find in Indonesia, and also in Myanmar as well. There's a lot of fighting that was happening over there, but it's starting to quiet down. So archaeologists and stuff can move in there and do their bits and bobs and start to re-find all this lost information again, especially to do with the second Silk Road that's more kind of water-based rather than just on land itself, like.
Right. Yes. These routes always complement each other. Right. So there's, depending on the trade winds at that time, especially, ships could kind of only go one way.
Yeah.
So when the ships couldn't go that way, then you could always do the overland route. So yeah. Or when it's winter, you can't do the overland route because Gobi Desert, not hospitable. Okay. Question: is that particular lion the original one that was once up on a pillar? Yes. No, that is Takeda. That this is the lion. It's just so it's been voided out, but it is actually still there, or maybe they took it down and put it in the museum. But it was up on the pillar in St. Mark's Square. No, that's it. It's that one. It's the very, very iconic, famous one. I don't know if they've taken this poor one down and put it in a museum to preserve its poor little hacked up self and put a replica up on the pedestal or not. I don't know, but this is the original that was on that pillar.
Because I know in Ireland, all right, it was Flanshina's High Cross that they did take down in the last 50 years or so, and the main cross itself is in the museum on the grounds, and then the replicant has taken its place. But the replicant is, withered away so quickly, so thank God they put the fake one out and left the real one inside,
right?
Because it would not have lasted the last 50 years with all the weird stuff that we're going in, putting into the clouds and stuff these days.
Acid rain for the win.
Definitely, but I'll not go into modern politics.
No, it's just thank God anyway. So if you all are interested, I have on my Travels with the Contessa channel a tour of the local museum with all of the amazing tomb finds from the 5th, 6th, and 7th century, and you can see it's not just ancient Roman glassware. They've got barbarian German daggers, like from goldsmiths made in the 5th and 6th century by barbarian artisans, right? Migratory people, artisans from what would be Central Europe. They've got mother of pearl from Okinawa that they found. Mother of pearl laders from Okinawa. They found glass beads from Indonesia, right? So these tombs in the Shilla dynasty that are now in Gyeongju just really do they're emblematic of how interconnected Eurasia was, even in the 5th, 6th, and 7th century already.
It's definitely something I'd definitely be into.
Yeah. Say when you come visit me, I'll take you. We can live stream us visiting this museum together.
I know. I have to.
Our people would love to see us frolicking in a museum together. They would love to see that stuff.
I know. And I also have to, because
Yuki and Ryan can stand behind the camera.
Definitely. And it's also, poking and prodding me. People are poking and prodding me as well to get get some 15th century clothing on the go. Because you have 15th century clothing squared away. I don't. I need to get 15th century clothing squared away as well. But we'll dive deeper into that later on. So, what else do we have?
Speaking of Asian influence, the French had rice in the 1300s. Yes, that is true. Would rich Irish be able to get it? I have not seen evidence of rice being consumed in Ireland in this era. But the English had rice dishes. So it would shock me extremely if the Irish, at the very least, the Irish who were connected, with England and France in terms of trade ties, if they didn't also have access to rice.
Because they're heavily connected, especially Kilkenny is definitely the go-to place for a lot of this sort of stuff. So maybe if you poke around Kilkenny, you might find something like that. It does sound like something fancy that might suddenly appear in Kilkenny. So I'll have a wee nosy around Kilkenny for if you don't do it yourself. I'll have a wee poke around because that sounds absolutely fascinating, especially if you had rice in Kilkenny at that point. We do also, because as we pointed out there, the Polo brothers had already gone off to China. There's an Irish Christian monk who also makes his way over to China in that period as well. So there is connections now popping up of even Irish people trying to just randomly walk off one day and off to China because they've heard about the place and stuff. And so I think for the Irish monk, it was a thing of spreading the gospel. He woke up one day and was like, I need to tell these people about God. And off he goes, knocking at people's door. Have you heard of Jesus? Have you?
Yeah, so rice was actually cultivated in Italy by the 13th century, I think, was being cultivated there. And so rice, there's a very common rice dish for sick people across kind of all of medieval Europe, from Italy all the way up to England, called blancmange, which literally means the white dish, because it's rice and almond milk and chicken, usually flavored with rose water, a little bit of rose water and a little bit of sugar, because sugar was considered medicinal in the Middle Ages. And so the English had it. So it wouldn't surprise, I would be frankly shocked. It might have been a luxury item though in Ireland, because the rice isn't grown in Ireland. It would have been grown in Italy and imported. So I certainly don't think that your average bog trotter, as you so charmingly call them, would be feasting down on rice on a regular basis. But I would say that probably in the upper echelons that they could have had access to rice through the ports.
Yeah, because if you go into Kilkenny Castle, the butlers have a fascination, like they're addicted to everything Asian. They're especially going into, I know this is way later on, up around the William Knight and Jacobite Wars. If you go into Kilkenny Castle, there's loads of Asian stuff in their rooms and stuff. So definitely worth poking and prodding and stuff. So there's definitely somewhat, but in the 13th and 14th century, it's in the realm of possibility. But I do see, if you're going to find it anywhere, definitely Kilkenny, with the butlers and stuff around the place. Definitely with our connections with both England and France at the time, because the butlers were also connected with the 100 Years' War as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely in the realm, and definitely a place to poke around is Kilkenny, if I was to say anywhere else. Just to get back into the comment section again, what brings Philip to Japan? A mixture of a lot of things for the time being.
Desperation.
It's a mixture. At the time, it was kind of a mixture of, because myself and the wife was working on archaeology at the time up in Dublin. She was doing the archaeological digs with the old Vikings and stuff, and I was doing history. I was doing tourism in Cove and Blarney Castle, and also in Kilmallock medieval town as well. So I was doing a lot of tourism at the time as well, and various other gigs I was getting a hold of. And all that just dried up. It's gone. Completo with the coronavirus. Coronavirus kicked in. And at the time as well, the housing crisis kicked off in 2015. Basically, Ireland's kind of had the opposite of what was going on for a very long time, where Ireland suddenly got super rich. Yeah. And with that, a lot of people just suddenly wanted to move to Ireland to work in business, and some people just wanted to, I won't go there, but regardless, a lot of people wanted to work in business in Ireland. And what was it called? That suddenly had a massive demand with housing. And so housing crisis suddenly kicked up. So rent and property and buying, all that stuff suddenly skyrocketed. But very, very lucky for me, the wife managed to get a job with an American company in Okinawa. So we were shot. We were gone. We were gone instantly, especially when we had no work during a plague. The two of us were gone in a shot over to Japan to go. And the wife's working in accountancy for the time being anyway. But the housing crisis is still sort of happening in Ireland and stuff. So we're keeping a keen eye on what's going on. But in the meantime, my wife is getting her all of her stuff squared away with accountancy and stuff as well. So we're still busy over here.
Yeah. It's I have lots of friends from all over Europe who ended up in Ireland working for many of those companies who in the early aughts set up shop. Developers, software developers, lots of software developers set up there. Amazon set up there, right? So all of that just drove up. It made the market go crazy in Ireland. Like Dublin should not be the most expensive city in Europe. That should not be.
But I don't understand. Like, don't get me wrong. I know communism and socialism is a very, 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 very dirty word in America. But because Ireland is tiny, right? We're not competing for resources the way you guys are. I can't understand why we can't do what Denmark did, which is, tie ourselves into our local areas. Now, this has gone way out of my area of expertise, and you can tell because I just don't know why the government did it, but they centralized Ireland in 1970. But the problem with that then is that resources kind of when it's trying then to try to give that resources back into the community, there's a lot of stuff, getting stuck in the system itself in Dublin. As you said there, like it's all like you have a lot of American companies coming in and then getting channeled in Dublin. And it's like, what is going on here? This needs to be shared out. And the only system that can really do that is Denmark. Denmark's system, if you brought that to Ireland, it would fix so many problems, and companies alone would then be able to work with the society way easier. And companies would love it. Like being able to put their brands in all the local small businesses and everything, they would be over the moon. Like you walk into a pub and there's a nice logo of their brand and stuff. Everybody would really, really, pay off on all that, especially tourists coming back in and stuff. It'd be absolutely amazing. But the way that they've centralized it in Dublin and stuff, I don't know. I don't understand it as well, to be quite honest with you. They should really switch over to the Danish system, like.
Right. Yeah. Let's see. Looking at the comments, maybe there's someone I can't see. Alejandro Bermudez. I guess I can't see all the comments. Very interesting. Yeah. So back to our Tang Dynasty Chinese lion. If you all are interested in more details, check out medievalist.net. This was a recent article on their thing, and you can go to there and you can see the pictures with all the poor baby scars. This poor thing. I feel so sorry for this lion. This poor Jean Mouchot. Okay, moving on. Let's see where it takes us next. What is the next thing? Okay, we did actually talk about that. That's nice. We did actually talk about that. That's also nice. Oh, wow. It's actually showing things in the proper order. Okay. So, death in Irish prehistory. What's this about, Phil? Oh, wait.
No. Yeah, these are the two pictures I needed to show chat early on that was interested in the burial goods and stuff that was happening with the books. The woman that had won that...
Oh, that was that was actually right after her slide. Actually, no, that was right after her slide.
So the book on the left is her book. If you're into archaeology and you need to suddenly update, there's no two ways about it. If you're involved in archaeology, you have to buy the book on the left to update yourself to everything that's going on. So the book on the left, you have to buy, and that's why it won Archaeologist Book of the Year. Like if you've suddenly produced something where you don't have a choice in the matter because it's so up to date, you're going to win a few awards there. So the book on the left, if you're interested in archaeology, definitely a must buy. And then if you're actually doing archaeology, well, you don't have a say in the matter. You have to pick it up. So There you go. The book on the right is Death in Irish Prehistory. If you're actually buying the book out of pleasure, the one on the left there, the book on the right I definitely would highlight as well, because it's everything that's happened between 1000 BC up to around 400 AD, which covers Bronze Age Ireland into Iron Age Ireland, and also just before the arrival of 9 of the 9 hostages and the start of the medieval period. It covers all those grave goods and the skeletons and stuff to do with that. So if you're into quote unquote what we call Celtic Ireland, there you go. There's the book for you. Definitely one to get before Christmas.
Nice.
So that's pretty much it.
Okay, brilliant. Next. Okay. I don't know why these are all coming out of order, but there it is. Okay, everyone. Exciting news. If you are in the United Kingdom or you're traveling to the United Kingdom in autumn of 2026, the Bayeux Tapestry is coming to the British Museum. They're actually taking it out of France, and it's going to be on display at the British Museum. So you no longer have to go to France to go and see it. There is a copy that's in the United Kingdom, but the copy has some additions and is also not the original. So you're actually going to be able to go and see it in person in the United Kingdom. And in exchange, the United Kingdom is sending... I don't know all of them, but at least a good deal of the Sutton Hoo finds and the Lewis chess pieces to Caen and to Rouen. So there's an exchange that's happening between these two places. And I mean, it's just, for those of you who are interested in, the one of the most amazing embroideries in the world, and I'll explain that in a moment. and you live in the United Kingdom or you're visiting the United Kingdom, this is a fantastic opportunity.
Big time. Yeah, it's so important for the two of us, especially when studying clothing of the period. A lot of the times, myself and Rachel will get asked, okay, so how did people dress at the period? And we always have to look at this sort of stuff to give us a little bit of an idea of how people were dressing. Now, recently, Rachel's been countering my ideas because most of the times I'd be looking at this kind of these pictures and stuff, and I'd be like, well, people then definitely would have dressed like that. And recently, Rachel's been turning around and not just questioning it, but turning around to me and saying, actually, they may have not been dressing exactly how they are in the picture.
Yeah, it's you can't. So yeah, art is great for helping us inform clothing. But for instance, these ladies behind me, if you took them and said, well, I'm going to make what they're wearing as clothing because that's how 15th century women dressed, I would have to tell you, sorry, but no, those are allegories. Those are this is medieval fantasy wear. This is how medieval art, this is literally fantasy garb, fantasy clothing, fantasy costumes from the 15th century. No one ever dressed this way unless they were in a play or a theatrical production of some kind, right? So you can't just automatically trust that what you see depicted in art is actually representative of what real people wore. Yeah, it sucks.
Oh, definitely.
It sucks so much, but it's like if someone 500 years from now were to open up a Swimsuit Illustrated, right? And then they said, oh, this must be how women dressed. No, not at all. Not ever. Most women don't look like that. And most women don't wear bikinis to go swimming. So, it's the same idea.
Yeah, exactly. Our interpretation may be different to how it was at the time. Like, I even think about it these days when somebody's doing something on the TV. Like, is that how people are going to see themselves even 30 years from now? Like, our interpretation of the 80s is not how the 80s was. Everyone sees the 80s as big, bright colors and everybody wearing these, strange kind of cyberpunkish kind of clothing and stuff.
Big hair, big shoulder pads. Yeah.
That's not how people dressed in the 80s. People were dressed so normal in the 80s compared to how it's looked at now on the TV and stuff,
Yeah, I mean, yes, there were people dressing like that, but that wasn't how everyone dressed. Yeah. So
time.
really great question. What is depicted in the Bayeux Tapestry? So Philip, do you know what is depicted in the Bayeux Tapestry?
It's the old Battle of Hastings, isn't it? The one, what was it called, in 1066 with William the Conqueror and stuff, is it not?
That is only a small part of it. It is his entire invasion from beginning to end, from rallying the troops, from preparations in Normandy, all the way to his coronation as King of England, right? So the Battle of Hastings is only a very small part of this tapestry, relatively speaking. So it's actually very useful, possibly, for showing us some of the more daily workaday aspects of life in the late 11th century in France and England.
Yeah. But you say possibly. Why do you say possibly for?
Well, because again, it's one group of nuns' vision of life and of the way things were done. So again, you can't just assume that the way they're depicting it is the way it was. There could be many reasons that they chose to depict a feast table in the way they depict it. That might not be how feast tables actually were laid out. You have to look at more than one piece of artwork to really get an idea like that. And archaeology also.
That's a very good point, because I remember myself and Connor were having this chat about 3 days ago, and we were looking at various sources and stuff for our chat that happened yesterday. And one of the problems Connor had was the fact that the Bayeux Tapestry is made a good 30, 40 years later. And the problem with the Bayeux Tapestry is there's a sudden change of fashion and the weapons that are introduced into England between 1066 to around 1080-ish, when this is all brought into England, especially from the perspective of the Anglo-Saxons, because in that Bayeux Tapestry, the Anglo-Saxons and the Normans are very similar to each other.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, and you see the problem is this is brought in 30 years afterwards. So is it the case that the Anglo-Saxons and the Normans were that similar? Is an argument that Connor brought up, because Connor believes that there may have been more differences to the Anglo-Saxons to the Normans,
Right. And there could have been the tapestry postdates the conquest by about 20 years. So in 20 years, a lot can change. And also, it's a bunch of nuns who make this thing. Right. So you know, their expertise is not the weapons of war or armor. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that they lived completely. I didn't say they were cloistered nuns. It's not that they never saw men at arms. They did, but it's just not. It's not necessarily. They're not necessarily going to depict things in a 100% faithful, accurate way because they don't have a bunch of men at arms modeling for them.
Yeah.
while they're coming up with this, while they're doing the cartoons, which are the sketches that underlie the embroidery. So yeah, you can't take the Bayeux Tapestry and say this is how people dressed and armed themselves in 1066. You just can't.
Because like another thing that people have pointed out as well is that they actually do a shield wall in there, and like as you said there, it's from the perspective of nuns that perhaps may not have been at the battle. Now, my counter to that one is, although they may have not seen a battle, they at least may have seen men training. So they may have seen men doing shield walls and stuff, and we're like, okay, that's what it looks like, and then how would it look like during training? Now, you know, being somebody that did a good 4 years in the military myself, what you do in training and what actually happens in real life, completely different, you know. And I do feel that this is more from a training perspective, perhaps, rather than an actual battle, and that's maybe what we're seeing in here. But you know, it still gives us a very good idea of a lot of stuff.
I mean, it is absolutely better than nothing, right? It's better. Yeah. It's better than having no imagery whatsoever and just wondering. I will never contend that. I just don't want people to think that this is a photograph that was taken in 1066. And unfortunately, a lot of modern people, whether they realize it or not, tend to view historical art in that manner. They don't. It's not like they literally walk up to it and say, "This is a photograph," but just are, especially non-historians. People who are just appreciating art and history from a very casual perspective, they haven't been trained to view art in this skeptical manner. So, you know, they'll look up to that. The sign says this depicts the conquest of England in 1066. And then their brains say, right, so this is how people looked in 1066. When it's not true, probably, possibly. Wait, I say probably or possibly because we would actually need contemporary art from 1066. Not about 1066, from 1066 against which to compare this in order to determine how historically accurate these nuns in the 1080s were, right? We're not the only people who make mistakes when we're interpreting historical fashion.
Yeah, very, very true. Susan has a very good question as well. She's poking and prodding you about the fabric for the Bayeux Tapestry.
Yeah, so it is a linen ground. And it is wool thread. And the thing about the linen ground, first off, this is not a tapestry. Everyone, I hate to burst your bubbles. It is not a tapestry. Tapestry actually has a very specific meaning before modern people started breaking the word. Tapestry comes from the French word for carpet or carpet weaving. And so a tapestry is this. It's woven, it's fabric that is woven in a specific weave in a specific way. Now, this is a silk screen tapestry, so the fabric is tapestry woven, and then this particular one is painted on top. But actual tapestries, the pattern is woven, not embroidered, not appliqued. Anything else is just a wall hanging. So it's actually an embroidered wall hanging. And in the earliest written reference we have for the Bayeux Tapestry from 1476, the earliest written reference to it, it refers to it as a wall hanging. It does not call it. So not even in the 15th century and before was it understood as a tapestry. I'm not certain. Probably, I'm going to assume the 19th century. It probably started being called a tapestry. So it's actually an embroidered wall hanging. Not a tapestry. And intentionally, they left all that white that you see, the light color, because you can see like this strip, everyone imagines that this thing is huge. Like it's like this. It's not. It's like this wide, and it was meant to go around a room, right? It was made to fit around the kind of roof air, the ceiling area of a specific hall. So it's not big. It's long. It's long as hell. You can see, like, it looks like it goes forever down that hallway, and it does. But it's not very wide at all. But intentionally, they left all of that white space, that cream-colored, natural linen-colored space, so that the motifs would stand out. Like you're not going to get lost. Like here, this is very busy, right? Like there's lots going on here, right? There's all kinds of color, and there's all kinds of plants, and there's people playing instruments, and there's animals doing God knows what, right? But in this, they're focusing your attention purposefully on the action, on the people. So it's not meant to be beautiful. It's meant to be narrative.
Right. Yeah, it's absolutely spectacular. Like, and it's definitely a once in a lifetime opportunity to get over to London while you can before it makes its way back over to Normandy.
Yeah,
perhaps, especially like the Normans will want. The actual Normans of today in Normandy would want their tapestry back, especially since they plan on celebrating the big anniversary in 2027, which is causing a whole lot of controversy in Ireland right now, if they want to celebrate it or not, because the Normans were invaders into Ireland, not healthy migration. So there's a lot of debate and arguments on how they're going to celebrate the Normans in Ireland.
God, yeah. Can't we just, you and I have had this talk before, and we're on the same page. Why can't we just appreciate the accomplishments of past figures in history while also acknowledging that war is hell and that people commit war crimes? Like it was
when it was, because we've been celebrating this since 2019 with the anniversaries to the invasions in Ireland, and when it was just the historians and the archaeologists and the living historians, by magic, everything was going perfectly fine. But by magic, when it was the politicians who got involved, now it's a heated escalation and debate. That's funny, that, huh? But you had a bit of salt of nationalism and everything goes to hell. Like, I wonder why.
Yeah, it's ruining everything. You can't have fun anymore.
I know, right?
Yeah, so comment, Takeda, Bayeux wall hanging is going to take some time for me to get used to. Yeah, I mean, I get it. Tapestry is way more, it's way catchier. It's way buzzier, right? Like I'm not saying that you have to stop calling it that, because literally the whole world calls it that. I just want everyone to understand that it's not really a tapestry. And in fact, the medieval word for this kind of wall hanging was either a dozer, D-O-S-E-R, medieval English word, or a banker is what they were referred to as. So there were words in English for wall hangings that were not tapestries. Like they understood, they knew there was a difference, and they acknowledged that difference. Tapestry was a very specific kind of work. And in fact, they even referred to certain bed hangings as being made of tapestry work, because it was acknowledged even in the 15th century that tapestry was a cut technique, not a finished decorative product. So yeah, I know. I don't know what else to just call it the Bayeux embroidery, maybe. The Bayeux embroidery. I don't know, the Bayeux embroidery, maybe. I mean,
I'm just gonna stick to the selling name.
It's an embroidery. I mean, yeah. I'm not advocating for a change in monarchy. I really am not. I'm not going down that road. I just want everyone to know it's not a tapestry, damn
it. Just Rachel at the very end. So everything you learned there, wrong. This is where Rachel makes her money. She waits for the tour guide to finish his tour, and then she waits at the very end and says, "No, I'm going to give you the real tour.
That's right.
Give me our money."
Spoiler tour.
That's what I need to say as well. I saw comments jumping in and out the chat. So everyone that went to bed, I'm sorry if you're rewatching all this stuff.
Yeah.
Good night, stay safe, and thank you so much for tuning in. And everybody who's just coming in for our next hour or so, Good evening. How are you keeping, lads? Hope you're all doing well. As always, myself and Rachel are covering the news to do with the medieval world, and soon enough we'll be covering all your questions as well. For the time being, we'll just keep to 1066 and the Bayeux Tapestry, and the Bayeux Hall was a wall hanging that we've now renamed it to. What was it called? So it's absolutely fascinating. I had a very good question as well that I seen in the comment section asking, do we have any other interpretation of clothing around the 11th century, especially around 1066? Before Rachel butts in, if you're looking at it from an Irish perspective, definitely look at the Lewis chess pieces. The Lewis chess piece is connected from Norway all the way into Ireland. It's just the Lewis chess piece is really, really important because it's a full set of the chess pieces that you can find both in Norway and in Ireland. So you can find bits and bobs all over Ireland and Norway, set to around the 11th century. And then with literature-wise in Ireland, look for the vision of Tundal, which gives us an idea of the word Ridra appears in Irish literature for the first time, and it basically means knight. But it's very interesting because the word alone tells a story, because it's from the Swedish word. We can actually connect it from Norway to Sweden, and then from Sweden over to recently people have looked into the word again, and they can find a connection then from Sweden to Kiev, and from Kiev then to the Byzantine Empire.
Okay.
So now people believe that it may be connected to full.
So Philip, you know that the vision of Tundal is not just an Irish thing, right?
Oh yeah, it's fully connected to the bigger, wider world.
No. You're missing my point. That if they look that up, they're going to get manuscripts from over hundreds of years.
Oh yeah.
So could you be more specific? Which edition of the Vision of Tundal? Because Margaret of York had several very nice, different illuminated copies from the 15th century in her library. So which one are you talking about?
Try to go for the one around the 11th century. So there's one written around the 11th century. Now they're copied and recopied, but the one you want to go for is written by the Irish monk in the 11th century. And then obviously, as Rachel said, it's recopied again and again. I think the version we have is originally found in Germany, from what I can remember and stuff, because we still have Irish monks going into Germany and stuff. And then from there, it kind of explodes over and over and over again. But the reason why that's so important that Rachel highlights is that version that I'm trying to say from the 11th century has that, Middle Irish word called ridra, which is translated to knight, but it's not a direct kind of Irish word. It's kind of, it's a play on, would you say play on words? It's kind of like a word that's definitely coming from Norway to Sweden. And then now people believe it originally came from Constantinople, modern day Istanbul, to Kiev, and then from Kiev into Sweden. And that's how we get their interpretation of what is a knight.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So Itorka Lewis chess piece, like not chest piece, not like chest piece, but chess the game piece. So they're literally game pieces. These are the face game pieces, right? The king, the queen, knight, I think also, the knight, the bishop, the rook, right? So chess pieces, they're awesome. Lewis and Lewis. Lewis. English is such a dumb language, man. Literally, I just realized you can spell Lewis like 5 ways in English, and it all says Lewis. Lewis chess pieces. They are amazing, and everyone kind of looks shocked. All of them have like these funny alarmed expressions on their faces, but
then you have that one guy who's biting down on the shield, and then goes into the debate of what is a berserker, and I'm like, but maybe he's just hungry and is eating I think that's what the joke is. I think he's trying to eat the raw hide on the chess piece, and he's just hungry. So
That's pretty good. Yeah, Lewis chess piece. There you go. Yep, perfect. Okay. Bayeux Tapestry, and if you're in France, then you will have the opportunity to examine the Lewis chess pieces and the amazing Sutton Hoo finds. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Sutton Hoo finds, there's a fantastic movie that's now on Netflix about that excavation. It's what's it called? It's fantastic. Ralph Fiennes is in it. It just came. This movie is very, very recent. It might be The Dig. Just came out, and it's all about the Sutton Hoo excavation, and it's a very interesting movie. Not bombastic. It's exciting only for archaeologists, probably, because it actually has slow pacing, quiet music, gentle digging. It's a great movie. I love it. I don't feel assaulted. I don't feel assaulted at all when I watch this movie.
Yeah. Definitely the movie for my wife. My wife likes more of that kind of stuff, especially after a full day of work.
Yeah, she will love it. She will love it. And I mean, the cast is, top level British actors. So it's very interesting. I think they, as far as I understand the Sutton Hoo excavation, I think they stuck really, really close to the way it actually went. I think they really did. And the Sutton, the dig. Thank you, Susan. I thought it was the dig. And the Sutton Hoo, what people don't realize is that excavation happened on the eve of World War II. The eve of World War II. So all kinds of bad shit could have happened to that excavation, especially when the Germans start dropping bombs, right? So that it survived, that the excavation was successful, that they've preserved those pieces is just a miracle.
Yeah. So for sure, like, but even the fact that didn't she just she just had a feeling there was something there. That's what they were going off of, and then they found this insanely amazing find. Like, so even the fact that she found it was absolutely magnificent. Like,
right, yeah. Big Dave has a fun comment. Those talking about the Lewis chess pieces. Those are some nice cartoony designs, aren't they? I love the Lewis chess. Don't you love the Lewis chess pieces, Philip?
Well, yeah, I have to love it because it's a huge part of my history.
No, but they're fun.
So yeah, 100%, and it gives us an amazing
independently,
idea.
just on their own, they're fun. They're so fun. They just, it's like
yeah, of course they are.
Yeah, I know, right?
A shield.
Exactly.
What's there not to love?
What's not to love about that? Question. So, what did the warriors of Hastings look like, if not like the wall hanging? No. Let me be clear. The warriors on the Bayeux Tapestry, the Bayeux hanging, may have absolutely looked like that. They may have, but we have to look at other evidence to confirm that that is correct for 1066. That's all I'm saying. I'm arms and armor, not my area of expertise. I've got some knowledge in it. But I know that from a general 11th century perspective, just from like the whole century, it's correct-ish. But you would definitely want to look at extant the archaeology at other visual sources before you move forward with reconstructing your 1066 kit. Yeah. And I'm trying to think of other visuals. I don't know. I don't think the Domesday book is illuminated because that's kind of contemporary. That's contemporary with this. The original Domesday accounting, I don't think is illuminated. So I don't think there's any sketches or depictions in that. I can't think of any other pieces with which I'm familiar from the 1060s, 1070s, that provides a reliable depiction or any depiction of people from England in this era or Normandy, because most of World War II destroyed a lot in France. Just saying.
What? Because the Crusades only happened 20 years later. Like, there's no illuminations from the Crusade,
that's 30 years after the Norman invasion. So the Crusades actually come after this wall hanging. So the wall hanging would be more accurate, most likely more accurate than for 1066 than anything about the Crusades would be. And the chronicles of the Crusades, they don't start getting illuminated until decades after the First Crusade. So it's that the wheels of illuminating history turn slowly in the Middle Ages.
Yeah, everything gets romanticized way after the event itself.
Yeah, so the comment is the artist took liberties for readability of the common person, so to easily tell the difference between the sides. Except that it isn't easy to tell the difference, right? Yeah. Isn't that what Connor was saying, that in the Bayeux Tapestry, it's actually not easy to tell the difference? What is that? Was that his contention?
He had the problem that it was taken more from, as you pointed out there, the nun perspective rather than a military perspective. So we were talking about the shield. There's a shield wall that appears with kite shields. And Connor would say that it's because it's taken from the perspective of the maker, that they wouldn't have done shield walls. But I think the nuns would have definitely probably seen a shield wall at some stage, because we're arguing what type of shields the Anglo-Saxons would have had. Would they have had round shields or kite shields? And I would argue that they did have kite shields because of the connections of trade they would have had with the wider world. I know for a fact there's a good chance the Irish would have had kite shields. But what evidence that the Anglo-Saxons would have had kite shields, I don't know, to be quite honest with you, because the Anglo-Saxons aren't really in my field of expertise. The reason why I know that the Irish had kite shields is because of their trade connections with Norway at the time. And then obviously Norway then was connected to, as we were saying there, Sweden to Kiev over to Constantinople. So it's a completely different trade network to what you see in the Anglo-Saxons. But the Anglo-Saxons still had an amazing trade network with Normandy until the war kicked off.
And then they had an even better one, because then they were no longer Anglo-Saxon. They were Norman.
You're rotten. You're rotten. Them poor Anglo-Saxons, huh?
Yeah, the printing. So actually, Torka has a completely unrelated, but very well, not completely unrelated, tangentially related question, which is a good one. Printing press killed illuminated books, I take it. Actually, no. Not at first. So So medievalist.net
really?
has a fantastic podcast on the Gutenberg printing press. Fantastic podcast. It's been maybe 6 weeks ago. Go check it out. Medievalist.net podcast Gutenberg, because the initial first 20, 30 years of printed books, they were still illuminated. The text was printed, but they were still individually illuminated to set them off from each other. So you'd go through this laborious multi-year process of printing out a whole book, and then it would get sent to an illuminator to be illuminated. So it actually it took a while. It took a while for the printing press to kill off illuminated books, but it wasn't instant. It wasn't like we went in 1453. We went from illuminated hand calligraphed to boring printed books overnight. It took decades for us to get to boring printed books with no illumination.
Yeah, we do have that interpretation that it's 450 and then suddenly everything's printed and the guns have just killed everything. We do sort of fall into that trap of, Constantinople's just been taken, bang, 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 bang.
It's now Istanbul, and they didn't even start calling it Istanbul at first. The Ottomans continued to call it Constantinople. Istanbul's a corruption of Constantinople, right? So
what was it called? Up to the siege of Vienna. Maybe you're about to correct me, perhaps. But up to the siege of Vienna, the Ottomans were calling themselves Romans. They didn't even see this as a thing of what was it called? A country taking over another country. No. The Ottomans the Ottoman family seen themselves as usurpers to the business.
The heirs to the previous. Yeah, they called themselves Caesar, right? Their title, they called themselves Caesar.
Yeah.
So
yeah, so they seen themselves as usurpers. They seen themselves as Romans. And I found that fascinating because in the siege of Vienna, when they're doing the paperwork, they want the Holy Roman Empire to recognize them as Eastern Roman Empire. That's a part of the signing off. And the Holy Roman Empire at the time recognizes it when signing the paper, but then they go back to calling them, Saracens and all kinds of slang again. They don't like the Holy Roman Empire and the whole Christian world just will refuse to refer to them as Romans. And that's why today we're still, in our history books, still refer to them as the Ottoman Empire. And it's not until around the 18th century going against Russia, and Russia also, by the way, recognizing themselves as Romans. It's at that point that the Ottoman Empire is just like, right, it's called Istanbul to spite the Romans of Russia.
It's funny how everyone's like, we are the heirs of Rome, we are the Caesars, right? That's what Tsar means. Tsar is a corruption of Caesar, of Kaiser. Kaiser also is another. The Germans are like, we're the Caesars. The Prussians are like, no, we're the Kaiser, we're the Caesars.
No. But the Irish did the same thing with Brian Brew. Brian Brew takes over Armagh and he just declares himself, I am Emperor of the Gael. It's like
I am the Caesar of the Gaels.
Yeah. That's what I love about the Roman Empire. Not the Roman Empire, the medieval period, is the amount people think, everything's nationalist. They're all waving the flag. No. They're all screaming at each other. We're Romans. We're the civilized ones. No. We're the Romans. We're the civilized ones. It's wild. I love it.
It's fantastic. Let me see. I believe BBC did a documentary that is a crosswork from the French team looking after the tapestry in Hastings Castle. That wouldn't surprise me. And it's might even actually be a good documentary. Actually, I will say that generally I really like the BBC documentaries. They are so superior to anything being produced in America, with the exception of Ken Burns documentaries. If I see one more bombastic what do they call them? Docudramas. I will throw something and break windows. But something I learned, I updated my information, my understanding. When I first started looking at the Bayeux Tapestry 34 or 5 years ago, when I was a little girl, it was the common knowledge was that it was made by nuns in France. But new evidence has pointed has created a debate that actually it was manufactured in the sense of made, created in England. So yeah, so now there's I didn't have time to get more deep into that to find out what this new evidence is, because I'm confident that there's probably plenty of people in France who are saying, no, French forever, it's our tapestry. And then the English are going, no, it is our tapestry. Yeah.
But it's still it still would go under House Normandy, because, and I can understand why the Normans of modern day Normandy would be very defensive about that, because of, and the English, by the way, they always skip over this. They always turn around this. Oh yeah, but Empress Matilda, she was Henry II. He was the grandson of, what was it, William the Conqueror. Yeah, but there were two different. And this is the argument that Normandy is having, is the fact, not just with the English, by the way, with other French people, is the fact that their identity is different to Anjou in England, and that's what's causing so much fighting, because there's an entire civil war called the Anarchy Civil War fought between House Anjou and House Normandy, which House Normandy ends up sadly losing with King Stephen. But then that causes them to become very and you can see that now with the anniversary coming up in 2027, is that the Normans, although they're very proud of expanding after the 1154, they become very defensive with their identity and stuff. And so I understand why they would be so defensive about this, because it is their Bayeux Tapestry, this is their main stuff to say, hey, look, we took over the world at one point. We took over the Battle of Hastings, and then we went from the Battle of Hastings to go, grow bigger and bigger and bigger until,
until the first English Civil War, actually, the forgotten English Civil War.
What was that?
It's like, seriously, every time people talk about the English Civil War, I'm like, you think you only had one? You're so cute. Oh, you're so cute.
No. But this is what I find hilarious, doing anytime somebody does a comparison between England and Ireland, they're like, oh, why can't you guys be more like England? And I'm like, you guys are having more civil wars than we are. What are you talking about? This is the thing. Especially with the Norman anniversary, people were like, oh, well, Ireland was in the middle of a civil war. No, so were England. England had a civil war. So at the same time, we had a civil war between the MacLachlan's and the O'Connors over the same problem, by the way, of who should be King of Ireland. Should it be the O'Connors or the MacLachlan's, which causes Diarmid MacMurrough to go over and get Norman mercenaries. But so is England between House Anjou and House Normandy. How's England any better?
Yeah, it's pretty funny, and then of course, well, I mean, the Cousins Wars were really a civil war. It was English on English, that's a civil war too. So yeah, it's really funny. The English Civil War, like, the one ending in Puritan domination, is somehow the only one. It is not. Okay, comment. So, of the women who created the tapestry, if in Normandy, of course, would be more of a Norman cultural, but if they were in England, might they have been non-Norman? Yes.
Yes, this is where the problem's going to kick
so
off.
I would say that if it's a monastery in England, then it's probably going to be not Norman women. It's going to be mostly Anglo-Saxon women. Although by the 1080s, it's actually okay. So by the 1080s, it's probably more of a mix, because at that point, there's been more time to populate the peninsula, the island with Norman women. And of those Norman women who are either born there to Norman parents or whatever, mixed parentage, some of them will want to join the convent or will be consecrated to the convent. So I think it would be mixed. It's not going to be just Norman. It's probably not just going to be Anglo-Saxon. But maybe more Anglo-Saxon than Norman. Probably still even in the, because, if this thing is finished in like 1088 or something like that, then it didn't happen overnight. This kind of embroidery takes a long damn time. I mean, it's couchwork, it's topside couching. For those who know what that means, which means it is actually a relatively fast way to cover a lot of space. It is, but there's still a lot of space. And you still have to draw the cartoon. You still have to lay everything out. You have to prepare the panels. There's a lot of work that goes into making something like this, other than just literally the stitching of the laying the groundwork. So, that's just, look how long it is. It's a lot. So it didn't just happen overnight, and it didn't just happen in a year either. So, what my point is that the people working on it were probably a combination of Norman and Anglo-Saxon, and maybe even Irish. I mean, I honestly, God, where's Twitchy Witch? Han, where are you? We need you. Come and tell us about the composition of convent.
Probably
She's asleep. She's asleep, probably. Yeah, she's in England.
Well, there you go. Well, she's definitely out cold now.
She's my monastic community expert in my community. Damn it, Han, we need you.
There's a lot of controversial questions suddenly popped up in the comment section. The next one is a filthy one as well. I know that the Byzantines also love to call themselves Romans. They did at the time.
Even though they spoke Greek, they viewed themselves as Romans. Yeah, they did not call themselves Byzantines or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah, you see, I get into trouble, right? And I always have to explain, look, I'm covering medieval history from an Irish perspective. So from an Irish perspective, when you say Romans, you're thinking of, the papacy and Rome and all that stuff. Although I do call the papacy, the papal state and stuff, it's still sometimes from an Irish perspective, especially when you're dealing with literature to do with the likes of Hugh O'Neill and stuff, it's easier to call the papacy, because that's what, when they're saying Rome and that they've gone off to Rome, they're talking about, the papal state. They're not talking about Constantinople. However, I do know that, I'm fully aware that inside of other people's literature, like France or actual Byzantine literature of the time, they are referring to themselves as the Romans, and they are, seeing that Constantinople is, the capital and the center of the world from their perspective. So yeah, you're perfectly right in there, and that causes so many arguments online, like a lot of arguments online, especially with Greek speakers. Greek speakers will just lose it. They will kick you out of groups and everything. Like, I've been kicked out of plenty of groups, and I'm trying to explain myself. Hey, look, if you're dealing with literature to do with like Hugh O'Neill and stuff, I have to, put it in. I know, and I'm fully aware. People turn around and says, yeah, but the word Byzantine Empire doesn't appear until around, what was it, the 16th, 17th, and 18th century, after the Byzantine Empire is gone. That's when the word Byzantine, and I'm fully aware of all of that. But I still, as a historian, we need to simplify the conversation, especially when Hugh O'Neill is saying, I'm going to Rome. He's not going to visit, the Romans living in the East. He's going to Rome in Rome, So yeah, that conversation causes a lot of problems for me as a historian.
I feel like the safest thing to do, really, if there is a safe thing to do, is to modify it for your audience, right? Know your audience. Yeah, if you're talking to a group of history amateurs or not even into history at all, then probably it's better to call it the Byzantine Empire, because if you call them Romans, you're going to confuse the living crap out of them.
And a lot of people, they just get so bullheaded, and you're trying to explain this to them, and they just don't care. They're just, that's their agenda, and they're sticking to it. They don't want to make it simple on you. Also, very, very, very. The Susan one is very controversial.
No. Where is she? Would Empress Matilda have been a good queen regnant?
Oh yeah. I was like, but the Civil War, the Normans, I don't know.
So Empress Well, not even that. So what I have read about her and her interactions in that engagement is that I think she was too imperial to have been a successful, and that's why she lost.
Yeah.
That is why she lost ultimately, because she was at Winchester, right? Yeah. She was about to be crowned. She was real close, but she lost support because she was too imperial. She was not considering she had been the empress. Right. So she was coming at it from this, I am God's chosen empress, and not from the perspective of early 12th century, midish first quarter of the 12th century England, where there's still a very Anglo-Saxon kind of feel to leadership.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But even the Normans at that point, they weren't the Normans. I'm talking about the Normans now who had immigrated in 1066. Even them, 100 years later, now have integrated into society. Historians now are referring to them as Anglo-Normans. You know, they're the nobility that literally grew up right next to these peasant children and stuff. They don't speak, like at this stage, they don't have, a lot of them never even been to Normandy. They have very little connections to Normandy at this point. They have more connections with the Anglo-Saxons. So they understand more of this decentralized kind of culture of, you know, having, as long as you pay your tax, the locals should be able to govern themselves the way that they want to govern themselves. And it also makes it easier for the noble lords to have these assemblies and fix the problem there and then, rather than to go all the way to London to fix this silly local problem. That was their perspective. And Empress Matilda was like, no, I'm the Empress of the world. You need to come to me to fix that local problem. And so believe it or not, this is so important to what was going on between the fighting between the Anjous and the what was it called, the Normans? Well, House Normandy. And it's weird because the House Anjou end up taking over Normandy so quick, as well on top of that. So you have House Normandy that's based in England, and then you have House Anjou that's taken over Normandy. So it's gone into a very
Matilda,
funny spot,
she doesn't understand that you need to reign in England anyway. In that time, you need to reign by consent, right? You need the support of your barons. You need to consult them. You can't just make unilateral choices and decisions. And so she just ends up offending a whole bunch of people who were going to support her. And offend makes it sound like it's their feelings. I don't mean that. I mean, like, she tries to run roughshod over their kind of, traditional and historic rights as barons in these lands. So I think even if she'd won that war, I think she was going to have a rough road ahead of her. So I don't know. I think she probably couldn't have gotten very much done, because I think even if she had one with that attitude, there would have been a rebellion and there would have been another civil war, is what I think.
Yeah. But like, decentralization versus centralization, it's not just an argument in England or Ireland. This is a problem even in to be honest with you, this is where it does go in my field of expertise, because I'm not sure why she has this attitude. And you guys are pointing out in the comment section as well, that's not just Rome, which has this funny triggering term. The word Holy Roman Empire, as literally fixes into Matilda, is also a massive triggering word, and also very funny as well, because the Holy Roman Empire was not centralized from my perspective. It also had a lot of decentralization in there as well. So I'm not even sure where Empress
but
Matilda
it depends on when, right? So like in her era, the emperor was actually had a lot a much more centralized court than later or earlier eras, right? Because it fluctuates, so it's, you just the continental idea the continental idea of kingship is like consistently different than the insular idea of kingship, by which I mean any of the isles, any of them. Right. That's just, it's a different idea. And that trend continues through the modern era, right? The French kingship is not the same as English kingship, even in the 17th century at all. So, that's not new, that idea. So she's got this continental idea of rulership, of sovereignty. And that's just not on with the barons in England. So she ends up losing. She ends up literally losing their favor, and that's what loses her that war, in my opinion. It's not my area of expertise, but I have done some reading on it and some studying on it. So let's see. The Jasonator, I just wanted to say it's super cool that you're trying to speak Old English, but that's a little bit before. So you're speaking the English of Beowulf. So that is well before my period, which is the 15th century, early modern English. But I totally appreciate the effort. That's awesome, man. Good on you. Good question. Just wondering, what time period did women start ruling kingdoms? I know about Matilda of Tuscany, but she is one of the only people I can think of at the time. So howdy. If you're talking about Europe, that's a different ball of wax than Asia, because actually that St. Mark's lion that we were looking at earlier from the Tang Dynasty, that's about the time that we start seeing there's this rash in the 7th century. There's this odd phenomenon in Korea and China of women, powerful women rulers rising up, because you've got Wu Zetian. That's her era in the 7th century. And then in Shilla, you have Sondok and Jindok. So you've got these progressive women rulers who are really good for their kingdoms based on the actual history. Meanwhile, in Europe, sovereigns, women as sovereigns. So you have Matilda Matilda, not of Tuscany, was on track to be the first queen regnant of England, but then she botched it. Let's see. Spain, the Iberian Peninsula has some queens regnant, actually, starting in the 11th. Starting in the 11th century. So Spain, what is now Spain, but at that point was not Spain. A bunch of different kingdoms, and Portugal. It starts in the 11th century is when you start seeing queens regnant. Is actually, I think that might be the earliest of which I'm aware. Now in the East, I couldn't tell you what's going on in Kiev or Novgorod or
because you do have that queen in Kiev,
right? Yeah, exactly. And I can't remember her name, but yes, so there's hints of it. There's occasional, it does happen occasionally. France, unfortunately, go on.
Because I think with Kiev, it's the fact of your family name, and because of your wealth of your family name, rather than gender, it's the wealth of your family name. And I think that's how a lot of women get very powerful around the quote unquote Rus area, from around Sweden all the way over to Moscow. It's really, how strong is your family name? And I think that's why women are able to get in there in a strong, as long as they keep to their father's great name and stuff. And how dare you disrespect my father's great name? As long as they have that attitude, because when that queen takes over in Kiev, which I also cannot remember her name right now.
Yes.
It's vengeance of her father. She justifies every single action.
Her story is amazing and horrifying and it's wondrous all at the same time. The things she does, so clever and so awful, just admirable, but also wow.
But she's not coming at it as respect me as a woman. It's a respect my family. And that's how, especially in that whole culture of today, you don't come at it from a gender perspective. You come at it from a family name perspective. Respect my family. And she, if you want to understand Kiev culture, you really do have to take it from that perspective. And trying to think now who else is in there as well, because this is how you guys had said at the very, very start of the chat as well, why Ireland and Nordic culture kind of fits in, because when you're announcing yourself, you don't announce yourself as an individual. You announce yourself by who you are, who your father was and who your grandfather was and who you're from. That's who you're representing. So you never come at it from this is how Grace O'Malley took power as well, is she wasn't coming at it from a gender perspective. It's because she was leading her clan, her family of the 16th century, and working as a whole. It was never about Grace O'Malley and her, I'm trying to prove I can do this as a woman. No, her family needs to survive. The Tudors are on top of her. Right. Who can make this family survive? Who has a brain on their shoulders? Grace does. Grace is taking charge. That's how the Irish were looking at it, that perspective. They were not thinking it from, I know a lot of modern people do look at it from a gender perspective, but it was a case of whoever can grab the opportunity by the neck and bring it is the one who's leading the clan. That's the way
Olga was her name. Olga of Kiev.
Olga of Kiev.
To Katie, you make a good point, and I was about to say this too. The Salic law in France prevents women from inheriting and queenship, and actually, it's probably one of the reasons that France doesn't do as well as it could at times, because they end up going with an inferior male heir rather than with a clearly much more competent and much less genetically flawed female to inherit the throne. Agreed, 100%. Yep.
I think that's why, who was it again? the one who pops up next.
What?
If we were to continue our little conversation,
going from
Ellen, if we were to continue down the line of history from Empress Matilda down to Henry II, it's Eleanor of Aquitaine who does not respect, because she, right, what's the, because everyone keeps, and I couldn't find it yesterday because people were asking me about this, what's the connection between Eleanor of Aquitaine and Iberia? Because everyone thinks the reason why Eleanor of Aquitaine behaves the way she does in the French court is because she has more of an Iberian
it's not Iberian. She's not French. She is from Provence. She's Provençal, right? She comes from the southern French. She's from southern France. She's from Aquitaine. So she comes from a warm and happy, cultured place. Like, she is raised in an extremely cultured, extremely erudite, luxurious court of her father, who was a troubadour, by the way, and he was a duke, but he also moonlighted as a troubadour, and he also was a ladies' man, and oh my God, what a dog. So, but she
so is her behavior
it's a completely different culture. Like, it's southern and northern France have linguistically have nothing to do with each other. Languedoc and Languedoc, they're not even the same language. They're not even mutually intelligible. So she comes from a completely different culture. She comes from, in southern France, women have a lot more agency. Women can inherit in these various duchies. She does. Women inherit in these counties and these duchies.
That makes sense.
So it's nothing like, at this point in the 12th century, France is literally l'Île de France. It's a little island. It's nothing. France is nothing compared to other polities, and Brittany is almost more powerful. Normandy is more powerful than France is. Aquitaine is richer and more powerful than France is. It's that France is kind of a miracle of history, honestly.
Because when I was reading Eleanor of Aquitaine over the weekend for the class I had on Monday on the invasion of Normandy and stuff, every historian was pointing out the fact that Eleanor of Aquitaine was so aggressive in the Paris court compared to what they're used to in the Paris court. Because in the Paris court, from my understanding of the literature, women were expected to, keep quiet and keep in the corner. They weren't expecting these kind of women to be, in your face aggressive. And Eleanor of Aquitaine, in the sources, she is very kind of, and they'd love that kind of attitude. Maybe you'll correct me on this one, but more New York and stuff, and London's another good place as well, where they love aggressive women who are sticking in there business wise to get the business job done. That's Eleanor of Aquitaine. And they didn't like, from my understanding of literature, they didn't like that in Paris. They didn't like that attitude of Eleanor of Aquitaine compared to Henry II, a man who was never on his, was never sitting down, always on his feet. He loved that kind of attitude of Eleanor of Aquitaine, another woman that was bang, 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 just like Henry II. Who was also bang, bang, bang,
she had to marry a guy 10 years her junior to find a man who could keep up with her.
It wasn't, and even the thing is, what's crazy is when Henry II starts to slow down, he's starting getting old. She literally dumps him and runs off to back to her homelands with her son Richard the Lionheart, and then starts grooming him to take over the world. And then what's he do? He starts trying to usurp his own father. So you're right. That woman, even going into her grave long after Henry II is dying, is still bang, 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 bang. She
had the last laugh. Like, seriously, Eleanor of Aquitaine, she outlived them all, man. She's like Louis the Pious.
I was just constant fast paced.
Henry II. Most of her sons. Like, she outlives them all. She's amazing.
Ireland has another version of her in around 1014. Grania, who was Princess of Leinster. She's another one, just bang, 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 bang. And she grooms her sons to take over the southern part of Ireland. Her son ends up becoming King of Ireland after the death of Brian Brew. Domhnall E. Breen ends up taking over the kingship after the death of his father. And she also, all of his rivals as well, is also her children as well. So they all kind of end up clicking together after the death of Brian Boru. And she's another one, outlives all of her enemies. And
didn't she have one
bang,
of those
bang,
sons
bang,
killed because he didn't do what she wanted? One of the ones she put in power, or maybe I might be thinking of a different. I might be thinking of a different Irish
Scandinavian
queen.
That could be in the Scandinavian sources, because the Scandinavian sources write a lot of that stuff. The Icelandic sources and stuff hate her with a passion. And the reason why the Icelandic sources and the Norwegian sources hate her is because when people come into the court, she's very in your face. She's constantly like getting in secret, according to the Scandinavian sources, during the court, you know, when people are talking about what their plans of action are and stuff, she'll quickly get in with a dig like, oh, you're going to do this, are you? Well, don't forget, last time you tried to do something like this, you made a muck of it. This is what you did, bam, bam. And she says it in front of everyone else. And she's notorious for that kind of stuff, right in front of everyone's faces. Where in Scandinavia, if you were to behave like that, you'd get a slap. That's not how Irish court works. If someone makes fun of you, you have to stand there and take it, you know? And the Scandinavians, they don't like that off Gormla.
Understood.
From my understanding.
Oh, well. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see what else we've got today in our presentation. Oh, right. Okay. Okay. So how poor transcription can muck up history. So this kind of falls in with our theme of history is not as solidly understood as we would like to think it is, and that we must often reconsider our sources. So this is actually, the thing itself is kind of minor, but the lesson it has to teach us, I think, is important. So first off, have you heard of the Song of Wade?
No, I have not.
Yeah, so the Song of Wade is actually one of these lost stories. It's a lost Arthurian legend. It's a lost Arthurian chivalric epic, or epic, maybe it's too strong a word, a chivalric tale. It is mentioned in two places. One is Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. His merchant actually references the Song of Wade. But we have no actual pieces of the Song of Wade. But then there's this sermon in Latin that actually references the Song of Wade in English. So this sermon is bopping along in Latin, and then out of nowhere, the preacher quotes an entire passage from the Song of Wade and then goes back to Latin. And it's this weird case, apparently, of this preacher, interesting case of this preacher using a popular story to try to communicate to his flock. So, he actually, I mean, I think that's just really cool that this priest who understood that his audience is not erudite scholars of scripture, that to make his message clear, he would need to make a pop culture reference. And that he switches from Latin to English, the vernacular, in the middle of this sermon is just so cool. But what's fascinating is it's the longest piece of the Song of Wade that we have is from this sermon. Well, fast forward to the 19th century, the antiquarians who found the chunk of text, because the Song of Wade had been known amongst Chaucer scholars for centuries by that point, but no one knew what the Song of Wade was. So now these rich 19th century Victorian antiquarians with nothing better to do with their money but study old books stumble across this sermon, and in the middle of this sermon is this English text. So the first thing they do, and it's great, they transcribe it, and then they publish their findings. The way they ended up transcribing it and translating it made it sound like the Song of Wade was a fantasy story about sprites and elves. Yeah.
Oh no.
And so everyone's like, wow, this Song of Wade must have been really interesting. And then there's like decades follow where there's all kinds of weird scholarship about this Song of Wade, about which no one really knows that much, except for these two references. And recently, some scholars new scholars living now decided to re-examine the original manuscript. And it's a picture of the book from which it comes. to actually look and see what it is that these antiquarians were really looking at. And they looked at the manuscript and they went, oh, yeah, that's a transcription error. So apparently, yeah, right. So just as simple as getting 2 letters swapped, they swapped Y's and W's. So just by misinterpreting a W as a Y, you change the word from being a wolf to an elf and a sea snake to a sprite.
Oh. Okay. Yes, that will completely change the story, wouldn't it?
This goes from being this weird Arthurian fantasy story about sprites and elves. Like that's not, there aren't a lot of Arthurian legends, knightly sagas that talk about sprites and elves. That's not a knightly saga thing, right? It's not part of the Arthurian mythos. I mean, yes, they've got witches and sorcerers and sorceresses and all that, but sprites and elves, not so much. Right. Yeah.
It's more Norse.
It's more straightforward stuff, the usual dragons and whatnot. Right. Lots of Christian mythology interwoven with symbolism, et cetera. But now it's actually wolves and sea snakes. And so now it turns out that the story has a much more recognizable form. Whereas before they were talking about mermaids and like literally they're talking about Wade being born of a mermaid. And now it's nothing to do with him being born by a mermaid at all. He's born near the ocean where the sea snakes live. But what they also did is they actually, and hear me out, they looked at the context of the sermon. Right?
Yeah.
They looked at the Latin, and the Latin is talking about wolves and the dangers of wolves. And it's, of course, that's a metaphor for sin and for sinners, right? The wolves versus the lambs, right? The lambs of God need to be defended from the wolves, right? And then he lapses into this brief passage from the Song of Wade, which references wolves and how there's a man who can stand against them. And then he lapses back into Latin where he continues talking about wolves. So which is more likely, that the preacher is talking about wolves, lapses into a passage that references sprites and elves, and then continues talking about wolves?
Yeah, it kind of doesn't fit the story in, but now we can actually have a full picture of what's actually going on here. But it's also really, really, really important as well, because it gives us a better perspective of how people at the time thought. Because as you're talking there about sin and wolves, and they're thinking, I know this is slightly going off topic there with this one, but it does remind me of Gerald of Wales and how he demonizes the Irish and compares them to wolves. So as you're saying this from an English perspective, talking about the evil of wolves compared to Ireland, which sees the wolf as kind of more of a warrior creature, a creature for warriors and stuff, having the Normans come in and invade and have this perspective of, you see the Fenian, the young warriors, and they're running around with the wolves and stuff in the forest. They're, having the perspective that, it adds into it that they're evil and demonic running around the forest. And some of them even are wolves. They transform into wolves, which is interesting because in Irish literature, it also romanticizes the transformation of a young warrior into a strong wolf. So it is very, very interesting that perhaps when the Normans were coming in, when they heard about these stories about these young, great warriors transforming into wolves to fight 10,000 men, that perhaps the Normans had seen this from an evil perspective. So yeah, this translation has definitely made me think about my understanding of English and Irish history.
And if you think about it, on the continent at that point, and even in England, sheep, lots of sheep, and wolves are bad for sheep, right? So that's, whereas Ireland was not a sheep grazing place in the first millennium going into the early Middle Ages, right? You had cows, you were cattle people. Wolves are not going to be such a menace to your cattle herds the way they are to a sheep, a flock of sheep, right? So I can definitely see how there could be a completely different perspective about what a wolf represents. And that seems to be captured here by the Song of Wade. So who knows? We may find maybe more of the Song of Wade someday. But for now, they've now reinterpreted this. I mean, and we're talking 5-6 lines. Just how impactful just 2 letters being swapped in a chunk of text that's only 5 or 6 lines long can be for understanding the base idea of the story. So moral of the story is, everyone, don't trust translators, don't trust transcribers.
I love how I want to try to go over and advertise the greatness of academics and why universities are so amazing. And there's a lot of people online who are like highlighting quack stuff, and I'm like, God, why can't they look at the academics? And then we conclude today by saying, don't trust the academics, don't trust the universities.
It's like that. Just don't know what you know, right? It's as a professional translator, I can tell you that it can be very challenging to translate accurately if you don't understand the full context. Transcription work is a shit show sometimes, because let's think about modern handwriting. Let's just think, how many of you have asked for people to write down their names and email addresses on a list in your native language? And then you get home and you look at this list and you're like, are those letters? Is that a 9 or a Z or a secret occult symbol? Like, that's modern handwriting. And now think of us modern people trying to interpret 12th century writing. Like, there's going to be some challenges. Yeah.
Especially since in every area they have their own little style of writing, their own words and stuff.
And then in scribal arts, there are official abbreviations that were officially known to those scribes but aren't necessarily officially known to us. So they'll just drop 4 letters out of a word and put a little diacritic mark over the vowel to let you know that there's these other letters, but you know what the word is, so you should know what those letters are. Okay, but if it's a dead language, you don't know what those letters are. So yeah.
Oh yeah. The joys, especially with this one as well, because this one's also switching languages. So we not only have the problem with dealing with one language with its own dialect, its own this, that, and the other thing, but we're also dealing with somebody who's trying to shove in his own perspective of Latin as well, because we don't just have one version of Latin that's trying to pull itself back to the Roman Empire. We also have multiple versions of that one. One of the biggest conflicts at the time is the Irish interpretation of Latin, all throughout the entirety of the early medieval period, going against Rome's interpretation of Latin, and a continuous argument on whose interpretation is correct. Like, because, of course, being Roman, we have to be correct.
Literally, it's our language. Sit down and shut up, you Irish.
Yeah, that's the way they were looking at it. And it's so frustrating because the Irish actually had so much and eventually it's such a funny thing because they were taking on more and more Irish, because the Irish had much more of because they didn't collapse, they had a much more better recorded dictionary of what was going on compared to the Romans, who had to suffer with their little collapse, depending on your interpretation. But the Romans lacked so much information. So even if they turned around and said, you listen to me, Paddy, you listen to what I have to say, they still had to go back 2 years later and say, okay, can you come back here and explain this? I'm missing all this information. And then they're kind of like, marching back to Rome and explaining all this to them. So yeah, a very funny relationship throughout the entirety of the early medieval period. But my point still kind of stays that you have your your Irish Latin interpretation, you have your Roman interpretation, you have your English interpretation, so many different interpretations, depending who you're dealing with.
Takeda has a very good point. Now imagine how much worse it would have been if the original transcribers of that sermon had been AI instead of real people. Oh, God. Oh, my God.
Stop. God almighty. There's not... Okay, so if you're dealing with annals, for the love of God, go over to ucc.ie and actually have a look at it yourself. The amount of people, I'm looking at it now, and I know myself and Yuki, by the way, we're watching our YouTube video, and we can tell a mile away that YouTube has done your translation for you, because YouTube doesn't understand the words in context. Don't get me wrong. For what it is a tool. You have to remember that. It is a tool. It cannot replace so many medieval translators, because what happens, and I can see it a mile away, I literally look at a translation and I go, this is AI. I know this is AI because it took a direct understanding of the word, as in it went, okay, so this, in this context, it is, la, 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 la. But it went for a direct choice rather than take a literal, this is what humans can do. AI cannot and never will be able to do it until we actually have a correct AI. But AI that we have today is not real AI. It's just a decision maker that makes, to itself, the correct choice, right? Which for this type of translation is not the correct translations. The reason for that is because it cannot do it in context. So I know for a fact, when I go into a situation, I know, okay, so this is the context. And then I look at the translation and go, that's AI, because it's a direct context. And every single time without fail, because you're dealing with so many, as in the area you're translating to what's happening at the time, to who are these people, AI gets so confused and just goes way over there, and I even know sometimes this is even more frustrating. AI lies. AI is notorious for liar. So I know for a fact, I can see where it's made a direct choice, but I also know it's lying because suddenly the choice goes way over there. And I'm like, AI, are you lying? It denies lying, by the way. Every single time it denies lying. And then I'll turn around to it and actually tell it, AI, I know you're lying because of A, B, you see. And then it tries to worm slightly. And then it'll admit, oh, well, yeah, maybe I was incorrect about that. No, AI, you lied about what you just said there, didn't you? Because what I do is somebody sends me a translation and I know what's going on here. I'll send it into, I literally, because I have AI. You think teachers and stuff don't have AI. We all have AI. Everybody's got it on their phone. And your teacher's probably doing this too, is they get your little sentence and they'll shove it into AI to know exactly where you got it from. So that's the fun of AI. Please go on to ucc.ie and look up the correct translations.
I just published a short that was actually spun off from one of my live streams where I rant briefly about how you can't trust AI. And I had someone who's a supporter, so this was a fair comment. He said, I think maybe you don't understand how AI works, because it can be very useful as a tool, and I do understand how AI works. I know that all it's doing is literally scanning all of everything that's out there on the internet, digesting it, and then picking the pieces that it feels will answer your question or your query, right? The problem is that the internet is not a peer-reviewed place, right? The internet is not peer-reviewed. I know you all are shocked, right? Not peer-reviewed. Who would have thought that Reddit is not a peer-reviewed source? Who would have thought that Facebook is not a peer-reviewed source? So when it just randomly scans looking for any words that fit in with your query, any hits that fit in with your query, digests it into what will sound like a really well-composed response, right? And then even goes to the trouble of quoting the sources, supposedly. A lot of people aren't going to go past that level. Right? All they're going to do is take that exact thing. They're going to assume that it's correct, and they're going to incorporate it into their memory, maybe, and they're going to spit it back out. And that's the danger of AI. It's not that you can't use it well. Like any tool, maybe you could, but you can't just use it and that alone. And still, I think we should stop relying on AI for that. You should look past the AI results. I will never stop saying this. Look past the AI results, because with history questions anyway, any history query I've seen people use it for comes back with utter bullshit. That sounds good, but it doesn't pass the smell test. Like look up.
No, I have come across the same situation 1,000 times at this stage.
Did the Irish have the kilt? So by now that answer may have changed, because I've been preaching about this for a couple of months now in various places that I may have influenced the algorithm enough for it to be a more correct answer. But back in March, one of my brother's idiot friends tried to get into a debate with me about whether the kilt was Irish. And he literally screenshotted the AI search results to show me that the Irish kilt was ancient and had been dyed with saffron since time immemorial. Right. And I was just like, oh, buddy, no.
I have the same thing as well, where I'll be online and I will tell people this is historical A, B, and C, and I'll have the reference. And then suddenly someone will screenshot, like on Facebook, for example, screenshot an AI response, send it to me, and I'll be like, I know exactly where that source is from, and I know how AI got that answer, but you don't, you know? It's great. Like, it is exactly what it is on the box. It's a tool. But if you are, and the worst people on there using it, which is the majority of people using it, because I said this a few times, and I'm sure you came up with the same answer as well, is people that don't know enough about history to be able to use the tool correctly. Because it's grand for me. I type in bits and bobs, and I can see a skeleton of what, a rough skeleton of what I need, depending on what's the conversation and stuff. And in fact, actually, what AI is very, very good at is once you've actually put together a good sentence or something, if you feel, maybe I can make this a wee bit clever or something, or even to fix your spelling or grammar, AI is very good for that kind of stuff, okay?
Agreed.
That's what AI is very good at. But if you are starting with zero, you have no information, and you suddenly ask AI, AI quickly goes through all the information and gives you a biased response. And that's also something that needs to be highlighted, is the fact it is very biased as well, because it wants to continue the conversation with you to get your information to sell it. That's its ultimate goal. That's why it's free, you know, is to gather your information to sell it. And it does not hide this, by the way. Google is very open about this. It's the same with YouTube as well. YouTube is, if you read the terms and conditions, it says the reason why all this is free for the time being isn't just to create an opportunity, which is the reason why it tries to avoid paying me a lot of the time, but also on top of that as well, it also turns it on that says it's here to gather your information for Google. So right now, everything we're saying here and every section is there to gather information for Google so it can sell you.
Yeah. Yep. So true. Yeah. Let me see. Yeah. So so my condottiero apparently used it to help with our cataloging of our library at home to get the numbers for the backs of the books. But yeah, I mean, you know,
it's a tool.
Yeah, it's a tool. But you know, as far as my personal experience when it comes to history responses, just looking up history, not editing, not even the translation. You know, let's not get the translation. But you know, when you're looking for actual history responses, you can't. My statement remains: you can't trust the AI response. You still have to go and fact check it. So you might as well just scroll on past and go do the research yourself if you really care. But you know, that's my AI. But you know, there's another thing that we creators have to care about, actually. So what's now happening is, you know, Google is showing the results in this kind of summarized results area, and people aren't actually clicking through to, say, our video or the website. They're just reading whatever it is Google shows them. And then we who are running the blogs or the social media, they're not actually clicking through to us. So we're no longer getting paid to produce the content. So they've kind of broken the deal, because the deal was that we content creators would make these blogs, maintain these websites in exchange for eyes on our website, and then the advertising would pay us, right? But Google's now circumventing that by just showing you the search results from the website without you having to click through to the website. And now the people who are spending their time, effort, and money to maintain that website and do the research and provide the information are no longer getting paid, even by the advertising deal. So yeah, it's like, God damn it.
Dirty rats. That's all they are. They're getting so dirty right now. This can't last too long between them, because they're getting too greedy with their. I don't even know what they're up to. Yeah. I have no clue what they're up to. They're just such a silly biddies. And also on top of that, I fully agree with Tris is saying there as well, because I've come across a load of those AI videos as well. But the AI videos on YouTube, they're clearly ran by themselves as well, because even the type of videos they're producing are. The titles, before I would have said, there seems to be somebody behind all of those AI videos. Yeah. It seems to me an AI machine is creating AI videos, and they're producing. You come across one AI channel now, and they've got a dozen videos on the same topic, and you click on it, and it's the same regurgitated stuff over and over again with AI images.
I actually had, I've had one company reach out to me several times now. They want to purchase access to my video catalog so they can use it to train their AI for history content. And I'm like, no, just no. just no. But also apparently they have a history of not paying the creators that they make deals with. But also, I'm sorry, I don't think your AI is going to be able to reproduce what you and I bring to the table in terms of energy and style. Like, at least I hope not, which is why, but that might be why live stream is the way we're going to have to go going forward, because it's the only way we can guarantee it's not AI generated content.
Well, for what we're saying and doing, it depends. If you're looking for Twitch content and stuff, maybe. I don't know.
Right,
We'll see.
Okay, well, that's it for our news for the day.
Happy days. Okay, so before myself and Rachel go off into the distance, does anyone have any questions there in the old comment section for us to go through?
So what do we have? What do we have coming up, Philip?
Well, I think it's tomorrow we have the big one with Kingdom Come Deliverance and the old Forging DLC. We're doing that about, we're going from 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. What time are we doing that for us?
I think we get
10 a.m. Yeah, we'll do 10 a.m. No problem. And what's it called? What time's that in New York and Boston and stuff?
9 p.m. Tuesday in New York on the East Coast, and middle of the night Europe. It's like,
well, we have to abandon the poor Europeans.
But maybe they can catch us in the morning when they wake up, if they wake up early enough. And then on Thursday our time, Wednesday night Americas, we have our Thursday afternoon, Wednesday afternoon. Thursday morning, early our time, Wednesday afternoon, Americas, we have our specialist on clans, the Irish clan in the Middle Ages, right?
Yeah. We have Dr. Ian O'Neill, who wants to rant about our interpretation in the late medieval period of the 15th and 16th century. He basically wants to rant on what is a clan in Ireland, not in Scotland now, in Ireland. And he also wants to rant about tartans and all kinds of stuff. And Rachel's going to join in the rant, and Michal is going to join in the rant. And I'm just going to sit in the corner crying because I love the romanticized interpretation that we have from Outlander of tartans and clans and castles and stuff, and you're all just going to break my heart and cry.
We have a good question. I have a fantasy animation I'm working on. My script has Gallowglass and Vikings crossing swords. Should I worry about the inaccuracy? Philip.
Well, it's fantasy, so whatever works, I guess. Vikings and Gallowglass, are they not the same people? No, I don't know. It depends on your Vikings. What's your interpretation of what is a Viking? God, plus at the end of the day, it's fantasy, so it's like,
I guess if you mean, so here, let me specify. So would Danes in the 9th century, 10th century have crossed swords with Gallowglass? How far back does the concept of the Gallowglass even date?
That word Gallowglass doesn't appear until around the 13th century, and all it is mercenaries that are immigrating from the south. So not every single by the way, a good chunk of the Gallowglass were of, Norse Gaelic origin, from around the, the Isles and the Orkneys and West Scotland, but not all of them were Norse Gaelic. Some of them were just straight up Scottish, like the McSweeney's, for example. They were not Scandinavian, but they also didn't identify themselves as Scottish because at the time they were at war with the nobility in Edinburgh. So because they were at war with the lowlanders and stuff, they themselves didn't identify themselves as Scottish and actually immigrated to Ireland because of their sheer hatred towards the Scottish court in around the lowlands. So it's always funny when somebody identifies the Gallowglass as Scottish, because it's like, well, the McSweeney's didn't want to be seen as Scottish. They wanted to be seen as Irish. In fact, they moved to Ireland to be as Irish as the Irish could come.
So it really sounds like, because the era of going a Viking is over by 1100. So it really sounds like, if you define Viking as these raiders, Norse Scandinavian raiders who go and steal things from monasteries and people also, then it's done. So they wouldn't really, they're separated by centuries.
That kind of interpretation. Don't get me wrong, the Gallowglass and the other clans, as we're going to argue about tomorrow, they are committing piracy. What was it? Elizabeth was asking this. She was like, okay, so when does officially the Viking Age end in Ireland? And I'm like, It kind of doesn't, because these same families are still committing piracy all the way up to the age of pirates. Like, it's still the same names that pop up. Like, even when Elizabeth appears, it's still the same families and names going back to the family age committing piracy. And then as you go into, what was it, the Jacobite Williamite Wars, when you have the official, pirate age and stuff kicking off, it's still the same families committing piracy. It's still the same, as we say, clans and stuff. So, when does the Viking Age
so for me, the
end,
Viking Age really ends when there stops being a season where everyone is literally terrified that they're coming, right? Like when it's just, your occasional opportunistic adventurer, shall we say, then the word Viking, that's Norse, so that's tied to a specific culture and a specific language even, right? So it's not just even piracy, because they're not raiding other ships, they're going into land, right? They're hitting the land. So piracy is kind of
that level of violence.
And it comes,
that level of violence. Yeah, that level of violence only actually happens between 793 up to around 836, when you have all these, Vikings coming from Scandinavia and attacking the monastic settlements in the coastal areas. And then you have the likes of Turgis that comes in and tries to push deeper, but then he gets completely bounced off the Confederation of the Enale. And when I say Confederation, I just mean, the coming together of the whole Enale, a big, massive to a group that's made. Like, Turgis has a force of 120. This confederation of Enale is made up of 8,000 Irishmen. That's a terrifying force. But Turgis is fast. He's got really quick ships. He's able to get in there, do his raid, just wreck up the places, as much as possible, sacrifice a priest and whatnot, and then get out again. So Mael Shocknell the First, who is, quote unquote, the High King of Ireland at the time, meaning he is the man with the biggest stick. Technically, at the time, the Irish word is actually re-roic. He's re-roic of the Enale. That's how he's referred to as in the actual literature itself. And he decides to dress up a bunch of young fellas as girls to ambush Turgis, and that's how they get a hold of him. There's no there's no glorious battle. And I even think when people say the word Viking invasion, they expect this big, massive 8,000 fleet coming in there and taking over Ireland for 200 years. No, it's the complete reverse. 120 Viking invade. Like, the reason why it's called invasion is because they're invading into space. They're invading into Irish territory. That's why it's an invasion. But there's only 120 of them. It literally is in the annals itself. In the annals of Ulster, it says 120 men. On the other hand, the annals of Ulster also points out that Enale have 8,000 men. But the problem is they're slow moving. Like, if you have a force of 8,000, it's very slow at moving around the place. And that's why Mael Shocknell, when at the same time, he's also trying to put his own nobles back in their place again. Like, he just marched on to Munster to put them back into line again, take their cattle tribute, and then march up north. And then suddenly Turgis has appeared and he's wrecking up the place left, right, and centre. And he's there sick of Turgis. So he's like, okay, I need to think of a plan to get rid of this lad. You young fellas, come over here. We're going to get some makeup on you,
Jesus. Yes, but that's Ireland. So meanwhile, the Norse are still raiding France and Germany well into the 10th century. That's where the Duke of Normandy is created, right? Rolf the Ganger basically makes a deal with the French king, with the King of France, a little tiny French kingdom. The French king says, hey, I'll make you a duke and I'll give you this land that you were probably going to take anyway, if you protect me from your fellows, right? So that's still happening well into the first millennia, wow, into the 10th century. So I think, you might be able to look as the end of the Viking era, maybe is when the Normans stop invading shit. I don't know.
Yeah, it's so weird because as the comment section is pointing out there, like, could you end the Viking Age in Ireland when the Norse become the neighbours to the Irish, when Dublin is built, when you have Cork built and Waterford, and it's a mixed batch. It's no longer Norse versus Irish. Now you have the Hiberno-Scandinavians, and it's blurred. Like, so many people, when they're asking me, like, okay, so what's the difference between the Vikings and the Irish in the 10th century, 900 AD? I'm like, it's such a hard one because they're so mixed fashion-wise. Like, most of the fashion from the outside world is going into cities first, and then from cities it's going into the rest of Ireland. Who is running the cities? The Hiberno-Scandinavians are running the cities, and they're all connected to Norway, Denmark, Sweden. So of course the fashion coming in then is all coming from these Scandinavian countries, comes into Ireland, and then the Irish are giving it its own mix, which we call Hiberno-Scandinavian. And then that fashion then goes into the countryside, where, once again, allegedly, according to the likes of, what is it called, Olaf the Peacock, there is differences between Nail fashion and Dublin fashion, but they're very, very similar. Like, in Olaf the Peacock, that story, the Icelanders, they cannot tell the difference between Nail fashion, and when I say fashion, I mean like the way that, daggers are fashioned together, or brooches and all that kind of stuff, because that's how Olaf the Peacock identifies himself as Irish, is because he has that kind of Hiberno-Scandinavian fashion, as the Icelanders would say, the Irish fashion. Like, they don't even call it Hiberno-Scandinavian or anything. To the Icelanders, there's no difference between Dublin people and Nail people who are off in the countryside. Like, there's no difference between the two. So, like, when people in the comments section are asking, like, could you finish it in 900 AD? Debatable, maybe. The reason why, like, scholars are still calling it the Viking Age is because Dublin is still in a economic, as Claire Downham has pointed out, now in an economic golden age. Like, Dublin makes so much money, but the majority of it is from slavery. Like, they're going into people's territories and kidnapping women and selling them, and that's the big selling point. So the Viking Age turns from, like, raiding. It's still raiding, and it's turned into an economic golden age.
So I definitely think that still counts as the Viking Age. I mean, and obviously the people living in those settlements where the women are being stolen from are also living in fear. So still definitely counts as the Viking Age. Yeah, it's always hard to sometimes put. Humans want things to be neatly boxable, right? They want to be able to say, okay, the Middle Ages ended in 1352 and the Renaissance started the next day in 1353, right? But that's not, we come up with these ideas of an age because it helps us remember things. It helps us put things into neat little boxes and digest them and understand them and analyze them. But, the reality is that it's an artificial construct, the idea of the age. People living at the time didn't think, well, we're living in the Viking Age now. Tomorrow it's going to be the Normans, right? It's that's just not how history works, unfortunately.
So to get back into your, like, obviously if it's fantasy, it's fantasy. But because, like, what's your interpretation there? If Dave went back to it, it's got a cartoon, like Disney's Robin Hood.
I agree, like, with you, like, it's fantasy, right? You've got it's animated and there's animals. And if you're not presenting it as history, then it's fantasy, then it's all good fun. Now, if you present it as the Battle of Clontarf, and then you're going to run into some problems.
Then you're going to have big massive problems. What else do we have in here? Don't know if we've. Do you guys have any more questions as well? Anything else you guys want me to cover? By the way, what is
that's the Society? That's Society for Creative Anachronism. That's the organization from which I come originally. So no, he's not. He's an Irish living reenactor. So, but not really part of any organization right now, right? Because.
Right now, no, not technically. I've been a part of Cleve with the famous Dave Swift, who's connected to the likes of Gone Medieval, and what else is he part of? The BBC. He's done work with the BBC, and he's done work with the History Channel. I have actually been on the History Channel for that stuff, but only for a quick second. What else have I done?
You're not part of any reenactment organization, right? No.
Not right now, no. pretty independent right now. And I was a part of the White Horse Vikings. And if you watch Irish type TV or anything, I've done that stuff as well with the likes of Irish Nationwide and stuff. So I have done stuff in the past where I've been on television. But as of right now, I'm not part of anyone. No, just doing my own thing.
So there you have it. Now I am trying to get Philip to come with me to Penzig next year.
I should go. I need money. I need to raise money. But I'm also supposed to go home as well.
You can do it all together. Like go to Ireland and then continue on to America. See, it's perfect.
Oh yeah.
Slowly adjust to the time difference. Makes way more sense than just going right to America.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. We'll see what we can do. See how money's like. Send me money. It's based from Irish lore and history, but I know it won't be accurate. But it seems like the thing is the Gallo glass are more kind of 13th, 15th century, and the Vikings are more kind of 9th and 10th century and stuff. If you're looking at it from that perspective, but
it's exactly. So it doesn't have to be too much. I think the fact that it's animals is going to give you a safe, plausible deniability.
Yeah, see, grand.
Okay, well, everyone, we really appreciate you joining us today for the Medieval Buzz with Irish from Medieval History, Philip from Irish Medieval History, and the Creative Contessa. If you are watching this as a recording, please put your questions in the comments. We will absolutely answer them. Otherwise, I'd like to thank my patrons and my channel members for all of your support. I really appreciate what you guys do to me. And if you are looking to support me more financially, lots of extra content, benefits and perks, Discord, live Zoom sessions together for my patrons and my channel members. And Philip, you also have a Patreon, do you not?
Yes, I do. We're doing classes on every Sunday night for you guys. Right now we're covering the Norman invasion of Ireland. We're actually just at the very start of it. So it's an amazing time to jump over to my Patreon on Irish medieval history, especially if you're into medieval history, because we're literally on the very start of the Norman invasion of Ireland. So if you're in that kind of stuff, definitely as quick as you can now, head over to my Patreon on Irish medieval history. 20 quid a month, very, very cheap. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, everyone. Well, until next time, stay creative.
Soon I see you. Bye. Slán.